Copyright Web Novel. Chapter 1, Traveling to the World of Game of Thrones. In the depths of the forest, two figures moved at an unnatural speed. One was small, almost insignificant compared to the other, which towered like a mountain of flesh and tusks. Both crashed into each other again and again, making the ground tremble beneath their feet. It was a man fighting hand-to-hand against a Tyrannosaurus. His bare fists slammed into the beast with primitive fury. On every finger of his hands shone a solid gold ring, 10 in total, the only adornments on a body completely exposed to danger. Man and monster were so absorbed in their dance of death that they did not perceive the omen falling from the sky. When they looked up, the meteorite was already too close. The world ended in fire. Date, 283 AD. POV, curse. I woke up with a clouded mind, not knowing where I was, nor who I was. Then I remembered. A meteorite. It had fallen directly on top of me. For an instant, an absurd euphoria ran through my body at the thought that I had survived. But that feeling dissipated immediately when I noticed that something did not fit. I heard neighing, shouts in a harsh tongue, the metallic sound of weapons. The air was saturated with a strange smell, spices, salt, sea. I tried to sit up. My arms were too small. Weak. Childlike. Before I could process the horror of that discovery, I understood that I was not alone. Not far away, a couple watched me with stunned expressions, as if I had appeared out of nowhere. Beside me, a small girl cried inconsolably, clinging to the ground next to two enormous stone-like eggs. I did not need much to reach an impossible conclusion. I had traveled through time. Date, 298 AD. I opened my eyes and looked through the opening of the tent. Desert. No, it was not just any desert. It was the Dothraki Sea of grass, stretching as far as the eye could see, beyond Pentos, east of the Narrow Sea, in the heart of the continent of Essos. The world of Game of Thrones. Yes. I had traveled through time. Well. Technically, twice. Before, I had reincarnated as Pickle, in the world of Bakey. And there, while hunting a Tyrannosaurus for dinner, the sky decided to fall on me in the form of a meteorite. I thought that would be the end. But I woke up again, reduced to a baby, in an unknown tent, surrounded by human gazes filled with confusion. My arrival was not discreet. It drew the attention not only of those who were there, but of the entire camp. Even so, not everything was lost. My consciousness had traveled with me, trapped in a new body. And, for some reason, my old golden fingers also returned, 10 rings of pure gold, impossible relics from another world. And that was not the strangest thing. At my side appeared Rhaenys Targaryen, someone who, according to history, should have died. Beside her, 2 dragon eggs. I have tried everything to make them hatch. Nothing worked. Even so, today is a special day. If nothing goes wrong, today I will obtain a wife, and 3 dragon eggs. In the vast Dothraki Sea of grass, one tent stood out above the others. Golden tassels adorned its peak, symbols of power, victory, and lineage. Inside, the light of the fire danced across the leather walls, casting uneasy shadows over the expectant faces of those who waited. At the center, seated upon a simple but sturdy throne, was the Horse King of the Great Sea of Grass. The chosen of the Horse God. Curse. Yes, just as it sounds. Thor Horsehead. As a time traveler, I quickly understood a fundamental truth: few things unite a people more than faith. So I took advantage of my miraculous appearance and my reputation as the chosen one to carry out small adjustments. With my own hands I drew the image of the god. I told them that this was his true name. His authentic form. I could not change all traditions at once. Not even being invincible. So I opted for gradual revelations, carefully measured miracles, and the convenient detail of not having lost a single battle since the age of 6. The reforms were simple, but profound. Thor Horsehead, true name and form of the horse god. Valhalla, the great hall where warriors fallen in battle are received. Hell, a cold and shadowy realm for those who kill innocents. Reincarnation, a new beginning for civilians whose karma does not weigh too heavily. Wearing armor ceased to be cowardice. Dying while fighting remained honorable. But those who harmed the defenseless would never enter Valhalla. And that, for the Dothraki, was worse than death. Chapter 2, Drogo's Challenge. As a time traveler, Curse knew perfectly well what that year meant. 298 of Aegon's calendar. The year in which the wheel of destiny began to turn. The year in which the plot the world would come to know as Game of Thrones was set in motion. He also knew that, in that same year, he would marry his other golden finger, Daenerys Targaryen, the last princess of the blood of the dragon. That marriage would not be merely a union between two people, but a key. An open door to the intricate and bloody game of power on the continent of Westeros. Curse turned around and stepped out of the tent. The fire inside cast his shadow over the nocturnal grass, stretching it until it became almost monstrous. He stopped at the entrance and exhaled slowly, as if trying to expel the invisible weight resting on his shoulders. Governing the Dothraki was no simple task. Not even being the chosen. Not even being invincible. Changing customs rooted in blood took time. They were savage, undisciplined, proud to the point of foolishness. They had improved since they began venerating Thor Horsehead, but they still despised armor, trusting only in their bodies and the simple weapons they wielded. Curse raised his gaze toward the infinite sea of grass. He had to guide them. He had to lead them toward the conquest of the Seven Kingdoms. But a doubt, silent and dangerous, seeped into his mind. Can I really lead these barbarians to victory? At that moment, a firm presence approached from behind. It was Mulgrew, his blood rider. A huge man, covered in muscles and war paint, with a gaze as hard as it was loyal. He stopped before Curse, struck his fist against his chest, and inclined his head in the ancestral gesture of respect. "Blood of my blood," he said. Curse answered without hesitation. "Blood of my blood." Mulgrew raised his head and spoke in a deep voice. "A messenger from Pentos requests an audience with the king of the horses most powerful on the steppes. He claims to bring gifts." Curse tensed slightly. Pentos. Illyrio Mopetus. Varys, the spider. A flash of understanding crossed his face. He nodded. "Bring him here." Mulgrew obeyed without a word and walked away. Curse once again took the main seat of the tent, surrounded by his blood riders and the Dothraki leaders. Shortly after, Mulgrew returned accompanied by a group dressed in Pentoshi robes. Among them were Illyrio Mopetus and the Targaryen siblings. Two servants advanced at the front, carrying oil lamps with delicate blue glass covers. Another helped Daenerys enter the tent. Behind her came Viserys, gripping a borrowed sword. Illyrio entered last, sweaty and panting. The messenger bowed deeply before Curse and spoke in surprisingly fluent Dothraki. "King of the stallions over the great sea of grass, chosen by the god Thor Horsehead, I present you my highest respects." Then he announced. "Viserys III of House Targaryen, King of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men. His sister, Daenerys Stormborn, Princess of Dragonstone. Their patron, Illyrio Mopetus, Magister of Pentos." Daenerys stepped forward with unsteady steps. She knew what this meeting was. A transaction. Her brother, and Illyrio, were handing her over. She observed Curse cautiously. He did not wear the braid of the cows, nor long hair. The stories were true, tall, imposing, with nails like claws and visible fangs. However, his movements were light, almost feline, and his youthful face contrasted with his overwhelming presence. Curse also observed her. She is worthy, he thought. Daenerys was small, of an almost unreal beauty. Silver golden hair, purple eyes. Blood of the true dragon. Illyrio stepped forward, smiling with excessive sweetness. Curse spoke, his deep voice imposing silence. What is the purpose of your gift? Nothing escapes the great stallion king. Illyrio exclaimed. Daenerys Targaryen is a noble princess, and her brother hopes that Pickle will send 10,000 warriors to restore the dynasty. A murmur ran through the tent. Curse advanced toward Daenerys. She looked at him, confused by the warmth in his eyes. Viserys, please, let us go home. Viserys exploded. Our home no longer exists. Illyrio ignored the altercation and snapped his fingers. 4 slaves entered with a cedar chest. When it was opened, Daenerys held her breath. A black bough rested upon velvet. Dragonbone, Illyrio explained. A gift worthy of a princess. Curse finally spoke. The sending of warriors will depend on the divination of Dosh Kalain. Viserys clenched his teeth. I cannot wait. Then a voice thundered like a storm. Wait. The tent fell silent. Drogo stepped forward, his enormous figure standing out beneath the firelight. His eyes locked onto Curse. Curse, he roared. I challenge you. Chapter 3, Aegon Targaryen. 283 AD. POV, Aegon Targaryen. Purple eyes opened slowly, reflecting a world they did not recognize. Aegon felt a stab of confusion. Wasn't he dead? Where was he? As his vision focused, he made out buildings of brick and stone, solid and alien shapes that belonged to none of his memories. He tried to move and, with an awkward effort, raised his hands in front of his face. They were small. Too small. Newborn hands. Understanding fell upon him with the weight of an inevitable sentence: he had been reborn. And now he was nothing more than a baby. He slowly turned his head, observing the room around him. The air was heavy with smoke. The walls were burning, gradually consumed by tongues of fire that climbed without mercy. The bed on which he lay was enormous, made of dark iron, nearly 3 meters long, covered with purple silk sheets already faded by time and heat. Near him rested an amulet of gold and silver. Upon seeing it, Aegon felt a strange resonance, as if the object responded to his very existence. Beside him lay a woman with black hair and dark eyes. Beautiful. Motionless. My mother, he understood without the need for words. She was not breathing. She looked asleep, but the stillness of her chest was final. Next to her, a small girl cried inconsolably, clutching a black cat as if it were the last anchor to reality. Aegon's mind worked with difficulty. His body was fragile, incomplete, and drowsiness dragged at him like a treacherous tide. Even so, he forced himself to remain conscious. Then, the door burst open. A colossal figure stormed into the room, a giant clad in steel, bearing an enormous shield and a sword that looked capable of splitting men in two. Terror pierced him. Without thinking, Aegon activated the amulet. The world folded in on itself. When the mountain reached the bed, there was nothing left to find. Only the lifeless body of Elia Martell, and a black cat watching in silence. The place to which they were transported resembled a gigantic cave. Aegon appeared between 2 enormous eggs, their surfaces rough and ancient. Not far from him, his sister looked around with disoriented eyes, unable to understand what had happened. Upon seeing the eggs, a violent emotion shook Aegon's heart. Ecstasy. He already knew where he was. He had reincarnated in the world of Game of Thrones. And before him, 2 dragon eggs. Luck seemed to be smiling upon him. But the happiness lasted only an instant. A deep growl echoed through the cave. Aegon turned his gaze and saw an enormous creature, a rhinoceros covered in thick fur, charging straight toward them. Panic threatened to consume him. He breathed as best he could and focused. He remembered the sensation of the amulet, the way it had torn space before. He tried to activate the talisman to teleport his sister and the eggs. The amulet responded, but nothing happened. The roar drew closer. Closer. Terror flooded him as he forced the talisman with all his will. Cracks began to spread across the surface of the amulet. When the beast was only centimeters away, the talisman shattered. And even so, it fulfilled its function. As Oberyn Martell stepped out of a brothel alongside his lover, Elaria Sand, a flash of light appeared in front of them. Both instinctively reached for their weapons. But they froze. There, where there had been nothing but air before, a baby appeared. Out of nowhere. Chapter 4, Aegon Blackfire. Date, 294 AD. Point of view, Aegon. Bravos. Aegon Blackfire, with deep blue hair, gazed at the city in the distance with his brow slightly furrowed. The sea wind flowed in through the window, but his mind had already travelled far from there. Resting in his arms was a delicate, warm body. Aegon caressed it absent-mindedly, though his thoughts were elsewhere, in another time. A year ago, while playing peacefully at home, he had been dragged without explanation into this world. At first, he had felt fear, confusion, resistance. But now, after nearly a year living as a time traveler, he understood his situation perfectly. He had arrived in the world of Game of Thrones. And, according to the identity imposed upon him, he was Aegon Targaryen, the supposed son of Rhaegar, last heir prince of the dynasty, nephew of Daenerys Targaryen, and the rightful heir to the Iron Throne. A glorious identity. And a false one. Precisely for that reason, he decided to break away from the plans of the former owner of that body. He would not be a puppet of prophecies or foreign conspiracies. He chose the path of steel and gold. He became a mercenary. Thanks to his absurdly outstanding abilities, he rose quickly until he became one of the two deputy leaders of the group. In time, he ended up occupying the highest position. The absolute leader. A soft moan escaped from the body in his arms. The woman stretched lazily, arching her back like a cat waking in the sun. When she noticed Aegon's intense gaze, she shrank slightly with a shy smile and sought refuge against his chest. It was Belgier Otherys. The youngest and most beautiful socialite in Bravos, a woman whose beauty was capable of captivating kings and princes. Yet at that moment, she appeared docile, almost compliant, curled up in Aegon's arms. Belgier was a declared lover of beautiful faces, and Aegon fit perfectly into her aesthetic ideal. Moreover, as a high-level courtesan, she had never had to sell her body as common prostitutes did in other continents. Belgier toyed with him as she stroked his blue hair and laughed softly. "You are so strong, my true dragon." Aegon finished dressing with her help. "After reclaiming the throne, you will be able to proclaim yourself king, and I will be your queen," Belgier exclaimed enthusiastically. Aegon turned, pulled her against him, and kissed her softly before replying. "Kings usually marry daughters of nobles for political convenience. You should not wait for me to become king, you might lose me." Belgier narrowed her eyes, smiling seductively. "Isn't it said that many Valyrian dragon kings had multiple wives? Besides, you are a true dragon. Don't you want me to lie in your bed alongside the other queens?" "You said it yourself," Aegon replied with a smile. "I am eagerly awaiting the day it arrives." Then he gave her a playful slap on the hips. "Your Majesty, why are you returning to Pentos so soon?" The voice belonged to a middle-aged man, also with short blue hair. He wore a clean silk outfit, his beard was perfectly shaved, and his bearing was severe. John Connington, former squire to Prince Rhaegar and his closest friend. From the moment he learned that Rhaegar's son was still alive, protecting him and helping him overthrow the usurpers had become the sole purpose of his existence. Aegon turned around and replied calmly, concealing the truth. "I heard rumors that Illyrio has obtained a pair of dragon eggs." In reality, his objective was another, to take them from the future mother of dragons. He had also heard disturbing rumors. Gregor Clegane, who had abandoned his brutality to develop territories and invent impossible things, refined white salt, soap, noodles, chopsticks, military whistles. Terence Celtigar, invincible with a Valyrian steel axe and accompanied by a monster capable of sinking ships. Even a new religion that worshipped Thor Horsehead. That could not be mere chance. It was not a common butterfly effect. There was only one explanation. I am not the only time traveler. If it were not for them, he would have followed the original course, lead the largest mercenary group, invade Westeros, and marry the Dragon Queen. But now the board had changed. Time travelers. Magic. Dragons. Gods. This world had become far more dangerous. Fortunately, the main plot had not yet begun. He still had time to grow stronger. They are waiting too, he thought. John Connington asked no further questions. He had already sworn loyalty to Aegon. Even if he did not understand certain orders, he would obey them without hesitation. After all, the desire for dragon eggs was the most natural thing in the world for a Targaryen. Pentos. Your Majesty, what has happened? Illyrio Mopedus slowly straightened up, wearing a careful smile. I have just returned, Aegon said in a firm voice, and I have learned that you possess dragon eggs. Your Majesty, I regret that the raven did not carry the news to you, Illyrio replied, surprised by how quickly Aegon had learned of it. Even so, he saw nothing strange in Aegon's reaction. After all, what Targaryen would not covet dragon eggs? Chapter 5, Aegon Blackfire PT2. Aegon remained silent for a few seconds after mentioning the dragon eggs. But his mind was far from Pentos. Too far. The rumors were not simple tavern exaggerations. Not when so many were piling up, so quickly and in such precise directions. Gregor Clegane was not a reformer. He had never been. Terence Celtigar was not a military genius nor a tamer of monsters. And the Dothraki, they would never have accepted a structured religion of their own free will. Each of those changes was a scar upon history. Recent scars. Far too recent. This is not the butterfly effect, Aegon thought coldly. This is direct intervention. Someone no, several someones were pushing the world with knowledge that did not belong to it. With ideas, inventions, and concepts that should not exist in this era. Refined white salt. Solid soap. Modern military formations. Redesigned religions. That was not medieval improvisation. It was modern thinking. It was Earth. Aegon tightened his fingers slightly. He did not know those travelers. He did not know how many there were. He did not know which worlds they came from or what advantages they carried with them. But he did know one thing. They knew the story. And anyone who knew the story of Game of Thrones knew that this world did not forgive mistakes. If even one of those travelers decided to move too far ahead. If even one obtained dragons, armies, or religious legitimacy ahead of time. The balance would break. And when that happened, there would be no way to go back. Before, Aegon had held a clear advantage. He knew the plot. He knew the key events. He knew the names, the betrayals, the inevitable deaths. But now, the fog was closing in. The future was no longer a laid-out path, but a battlefield shrouded in shadows, where each traveler waited for the right moment to strike. We are all waiting for the beginning of the plot, he thought. But not for the same reasons. Some would wait to exploit the chaos. Others to steal the spotlight. Others to become gods. And some, simply to survive. Aegon knew he could not afford passivity. If the other travelers were already moving pieces creating technologies, religions, monsters, and legends, then remaining in the shadows would be equivalent to dying slowly. He needed dragons. Not as symbols. As weapons. As absolute deterrence. Dragons did not only burn armies. They burned alternate futures. They forced players to reveal their cards. That was why Pentos was crucial. That was why Illyrio was crucial. That was why Daenerys was crucial. Illyrio, unaware of the storm forming in Aegon's mind, continued speaking in a conciliatory tone. The eggs are ancient relics, Your Majesty. Objects of great value, but useless to most. Aegon looked at him steadily. Useless to those who do not know how to use them. Illyrio felt an inexplicable chill. Aegon added nothing more. He did not need to. If there were other time travelers in this world, then sooner or later they would collide. Not for ideals. Not for justice. But for control of the future. And in that game, only the one who moved one step ahead of the others would survive. Chapter 6, The Duel Against Drogo. Curse. Drogo almost roared his name, his voice laden with determination and defiance. I challenge you. Curse stopped. His eyes locked onto Drogo with absolute calm. Unlike the Drogo remembered in the stories, this one wore his braid noticeably shorter and bore a deep scar on his shoulder, with the unmistakable shape of a bite. Both were my doing, I thought with disdain. He lost the braid when he fell defeated by my hand. The bite, well, that was an old habit. Back then, I hadn't yet modernized myself. I smiled contemptuously at his challenge. That man was nothing more than a defeated general. For some time now I had noticed the way he looked at Daenerys, a poorly concealed mix of desire and ambition. At first, I decided to keep him alive only because I planned to use him in the ritual to incubate the dragon eggs that Illyrio was supposed to gift me. But Illyrio did not deliver the eggs. Instead, he gave me a dragon bone bow. May the horse god bear witness to our battle, Drogo proclaimed in a loud, powerful voice, echoing throughout the tent. Illyrio and his men stepped back to clear the space. The others, far from trying to stop the confrontation, formed a wide circle, watching with gleaming eyes and savage smiles. Fight! Fight! The chant rose in unison, like the roar of a hungry beast. Ha! I mocked. A general who already lost to me and even lost his braid dares to challenge me. My lips curled into a cruel grin as I stepped forward. I planted myself in front of Drogo. He was half a meter shorter than me. The battle was about to begin. The Blood Riders tightened their grip on their weapons, watching the crowd to prevent any interference. The circle closed, the cheers grew louder, and the air filled with tension and anticipation. Drogo's body was covered in muscle and scars, but none stood out as much as the bite mark on his shoulder. I, on the other hand, bore no braids, no tattoos, no visible marks. Yet my body was forged of pure muscle and exuded a suffocating, almost bestial pressure. Though Drogo stood nearly 2 meters tall, he looked thin and fragile beside me. Daenerys watched from the crowd, her face flushed, unable to tear her gaze away from my naked body. The duel began. Drogo roared like a wild beast and charged at me. The ground trembled beneath his steps. The Iraq traced a shining arc under the firelight, fast and deadly. Drogo's supporters shouted and beat their chests, convinced that my end stood before them. But I was faster. I dodged every attack with ease, and after each evasion, my hand crashed back into his face. Again and again. The crowd began to realize it. This was not a duel. It was a public humiliation. I never used a weapon. I never used my full strength. When boredom finally caught up with me, I decided to end it. I surged forward and seized his neck with my left hand. I squeezed. Ah! Drogo screamed as blood burst from his eyes, nose, and mouth. His body convulsed for a few seconds before going still. I released his neck. The body fell heavily to the ground. Silence. Then, celebration erupted. Illyrio stepped forward with a nervous smile and applauded. What a great battle! Defeating his opponent with ease. Curse is, without a doubt, the chosen of the god Thor, Horsehead. I did not respond. I simply looked at the body on the ground. One king less. Chapter 7, Illyrio is afraid. Illyrio applauded, smiling. But inside, something had broken. As he stared at Drogo's inert body on the ground, a drop of cold sweat slowly ran down his temple. It was not death that unsettled him, in Essos he had seen stronger and more famous men die. It was the ease. Curse was not breathing heavily. He showed no excitement or pride. He did not even seem satisfied. He had killed Pickle as one crushes an insect, and then had lost interest. This is not a Dothraki, Illyrio thought, swallowing. Nor is he a mere warrior. He had believed he controlled the situation. That curse was just another piece on his board, yes, a powerful weapon, but still manageable. A barbarian with ambition, manipulable with promises of power, women, and dragons. Now he was no longer so sure. When Curse's eyes lifted and briefly met his, Illyrio felt a chill run down his spine. There was no anger in that gaze. No madness either. There was calculation. There was hunger. And that was far worse. If one day he decides he no longer needs me. Illyrio did not finish the thought. He smiled more broadly, exaggerated his enthusiasm, and slightly lowered his head in a gesture of respect. A true chosen of the gods, he repeated, this time in a lower voice. But in his heart, one truth settled with terrifying clarity. Curse was not a king he could crown. He was a calamity. And he could only hope not to be in his path when he decided to ravage the world. Chapter 8, Daenerys Targaryen's Marriage. The wedding feast began at dawn. Curse summoned all his people to the ceremony, a total of 50,000 Dothraki warriors, in addition to countless women, children, and slaves. Soon, miles upon miles of tents stretched across the land like a sea of leather and cloth. Both men and women went bare-chested, wearing painted leather vests and bronze belts around their waists. The male warriors used animal fat to grease their long braids, which gleamed in the light of the rising sun. The servants soon arrived with food, steaming cuts of meat, thick black sausages, Dothraki blood pies, fresh fruits, and sweets brought from Pentos. Everyone feasted on horse meat roasted with honey and peppers, while drinking fermented mare's milk and the wine provided by Illyrio. They laughed, drank, and joked with one another around the bonfires. Then, a roar of drums shook the camp, and the women began to dance to entertain Curse. Not far away, two warriors fixed their gaze on the same dancer and began to strike each other with their fists. The others quickly formed a circle around them, with no intention of stopping the fight. On the contrary, they watched the scene with enthusiasm. Fight! Fight! The crowd shouted in unison, exhilarated. Unlike traditional Dothraki weddings where it was believed that a wedding without at least 3 deaths was a failure, the religious reforms dictated that any blood spilled on a festive day was blasphemy. Only the blood of enemies, shed on the battlefield, pleased the god Thor, Horsehead. Not far from there, Sir Yoram Mormont sat beside Viserys. His eyes drifted from time to time toward Daenerys, revealing deep concern. When the sun began to set, Curse clapped his hands. Instantly, the drums, shouts, fights, and feasting ceased. Curse rose and helped Daenerys to her feet. Daenerys seemed small beside him, she stood barely 1.57 meters tall, while Curse reached a height of 2.4 meters. Soon, the ceremony of presenting gifts to the bride began. Viserys cast a meaningful glance at Sir Jorah, who left the tent with a bitter expression and returned shortly afterward accompanied by several slave women chained with bronze shackles. Viserys spoke with a forced smile. Illyrio and I have chosen them for you. They are not common slaves. All of them are very skilled. Irri will teach you to ride, Yahiki will teach you the Dothraki language, and Doria will teach you how to sleep. Then Magister Illyrio gave a slight order. 4 sturdy slaves stepped forward and placed before Daenerys a chest overflowing with the finest velvet and brocade produced by the free cities. Among the gifts was also the dragon bone bow. The tributes continued. According to tradition, Pickle's blood riders gifted Daenerys 3 gleaming weapons. Other Dothraki approached with various gifts, jeweled slippers, silver ribbons for the hair, belts with medallions, painted vests, needles, a nightgown woven with furs, soft silks, and bottles of perfume. The gifts piled up around her, far exceeding anything she had ever imagined or needed. At that moment, Daenerys felt deeply happy. For the first time, she felt like a true princess. Finally, Pickle presented his own gift. He stepped away from Daenerys, and an expectant silence spread across the camp. Everyone waited, holding their breath. When he returned, he did so accompanied by several Dothraki carrying a box. Before the eager eyes of all, Pickle opened it. "Is it a dragon egg?" Daenerys asked, excited. The surface of the egg was covered in tiny scales that emitted a golden sheen, reflecting the light of the setting sun. "It's beautiful," Daenerys murmured, cautiously extending her hand to touch the shell. Pickle looked at the egg and smiled. It was one of the 2 dragon eggs that had appeared with him when he reincarnated into that world. Seeing Daenerys's expression, his smile grew even more satisfied. Gradually, the noise of the wedding faded away. The crowd began to withdraw, leaving behind disorder, the strong smell of wine, and the occasional sparks from the bonfires. Then, Pickle led Daenerys to a tent prepared solely for them. The tent was decorated with colored silks, and the floor was covered with soft carpets. Pickle carefully lifted Daenerys and placed her on the bed. Then he sat in front of her, so that their faces were at the same height. Daenerys understood what would happen next. Blushing, she asked softly, "Are we going to do it?" Pickle smiled. He leaned toward her and, close to her ear, spoke fluently in the common tongue of the 7 kingdoms. "Princess Daenerys Targaryen, with the blood of Aegon the Conqueror flowing through your veins. I, the chosen of the god Thor, Horsehead, swear to lead you to conquer the 7 kingdoms and reclaim the usurper's throne." Daenerys's eyes widened in surprise. She had never imagined that a supposed barbarian could speak the common tongue so clearly, nor that he knew so much about her. But before she could respond, Pickle gently captured her lips and drew her toward him. Chapter 9, On the way to V's Dothraki and Problems with Viserys. Pickle rode along with Daenerys on his steed, while his blood riders followed closely behind them, forming a silent ring of steel and watchful gazes. It took a full month to cross the forest of Qohor. There, golden leaves covered the sky like an eternal roof, and the tree trunks were as wide as the gates of a fortified city. The air was thick with humidity, resin, and ancient whispers. Beyond the forest, the vast lands opened into an ocean of green grass. That was the Dothraki Sea. Even in autumn, the Dothraki Sea remained covered in green, endless, untamed, as if it refused to wither before the passage of time. Viserys wore a cashmere robe so dusty that the 3-headed dragon embroidered on the chest was barely visible. He rode in the middle of the group, constantly glancing around with anxiety, as if expecting an attack at any moment. From time to time, he cast looks filled with contempt toward the Dothraki, unable to hide his revulsion. Daenerys, who had remained silent for much of the journey, finally spoke, trying to strike up a conversation with her new husband. "Where are we going now? When will we arrive?" Pickle turned his head slightly and observed her beautiful face before answering. "We will travel east of the Dothraki Sea. There stands V's Dothraki, the sacred city of the Dothraki." Daenerys then remembered the true purpose of the journey and asked, with a knot in her throat, "And what if the result of the divination is bad?" Before any major military undertaking, the Dothraki demanded consultation with the Dosh Kalain. The Dosh Kalain were composed of the widows of fallen khals. They served as seers, interpreters of omens, and guardians of the future. In essence, they were also the spiritual leaders of the Dothraki people. Pickle looked into Daenerys's large violet eyes, heavy with concern. He reached out and gently stroked her head. "The god Thor Horsehead will protect us," he said confidently. "He prefers his followers to offer the blood of their enemies fallen in battle as tribute. We will use the Iraq and the blood of the warriors of West Eros to honor him. Besides, I have long controlled the Dosh Kalain, Curse thought coldly. Her husband's words calmed Daenerys, though a shadow of unease still lingered in her heart. As evening fell, the group decided to stop and rest. Curse went alone away from the camp to hunt a Hrocker. A man as noble as he, king of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, ruler of the Seven Kingdoms and protector of the realm, Viserys III of House Targaryen, should not be forced to travel surrounded by barbarians. Illyrio Mopedus had urged him to marry his sister to kill Curse, but Viserys was convinced it had been a mistake. If he has lied to me, I will teach him not to trifle with a dragon, he swore silently, tightening his grip on the hilt of his sword. Determined, he went in search of Daenerys to order her to speak with her savage husband and pressure him to fulfill his promise to help reclaim the Iron Throne. When he finally found his sister, she was sitting on the grass, accompanied by her 3 handmaids. She wore Dothraki leathers, and her long silver-gold hair was tied behind her head with an animal bone. There was something different about her, 7 parts strength and 3 parts wild fierceness. She was more beautiful than before, and also more unfamiliar. Viserys' displeasure grew. He could not understand how a pure-blooded Targaryen adapted so quickly to the life of those savages. Daenerys, he shouted in a shrill voice. Curse promised to help me reclaim my throne. Daenerys lifted her gaze calmly, not allowing her brother's anger to affect her. Brother, what nonsense are you talking about? She replied serenely. He said that he first had to consult the Dosh Kalain to decide whether he would help you. How dare you? Viserys roared. How dare you make your king wait? He paused and forced a twisted smile. Then I will have to give you to someone else in exchange for his support. Someone who will truly help us reclaim the Iron Throne. Daenerys's eyes widened, as if seeing her brother for the first time. Dany, I am your brother, I am your king. Everything I do is for your own good. Viserys exclaimed. Daenerys slowly rose to her feet, her violet eyes shining with restrained fury. You are wrong, she said firmly. I will be with no one else. He is my only husband. Viserys was stunned. Rage consumed him. His face reddened as he grabbed Daenerys by the neck and shook her violently. Have you forgotten who you are? Look at you now, dressed like a savage. Daenerys understood perfectly what he meant. She was barefoot. Her hair was oiled. She wore the Dothraki leathers and the painted vest given to her as a wedding gift. She looked like one of them, while Viserys remained covered in silks and mail. Her silence only fueled her brother's fury. Suddenly, someone shoved Viserys and struck him with a heavy punch. A powerful hand closed around his neck, warping his face. It was Mulgrew. After restraining him, he spoke in Dothraki, looking at Daenerys. Princess Daenerys, Eerie translated with a trembling voice, Mulgrew asks if he should kill him. Daenerys shook her head. No. Mulgrew understood. He knew that Curse's wife could not decide the death of her own brother. He then suggested another punishment. Why don't we cut off one of his hands? I don't want him to be harmed, Daenerys replied, her expression conflicted. After all, Viserys was her brother. Finally, she said firmly. Wait until my son and stars decides what to do with him. At nightfall, Curse returned to the camp with the corpse of a Hrocker. Daenerys remained silent, staring at the stew he had prepared. Her violet eyes did not leave the bowl. Upon learning of the incident, Curse felt a sharp pain in his head. His first decision had been to kill Viserys. He was not useful, only an obstacle to him and Daenerys claiming the Iron Throne. But he stopped when he saw the sad expression on his wife's face. If he went through with it, even if Daenerys forgave him someday, the rift between them would never disappear. It's better to stick to the original plan, he thought. When we reach V's Dothraki, I will find an opportunity to kill him in secret. Perhaps Viserys would even thank him in the afterlife. After all, he was already half mad. Death, in the end, might be a relief. Chapter 10, The One Chosen by Thor Horsehead. To the east of the continent of Essos stretches the vast, fertile, and flat Dothraki Sea of grass, a green ocean that seems to have no end, where the wind ripples the grass as if it were living waves. Ves Dothrak, the sacred city, rises beyond the Dothraki Sea, at the foot of the Mother of Mountains and beside the silent womb of the world, whose waters reflect the sky like an ancient mirror. At the entrance to the city stood the legendary Horse Gate. Where once two majestic bronze sculptures honoring the great cows of the past had stood, there now rose several imposing statues of the god Thor Horsehead, newly cast and gleaming with a solemn radiance. They had been erected by direct order of Kulkurs, and their presence imposed a new faith upon the ancient tradition. Led by Kulkurs, the Kalasar passed beneath the Horse Gate and advanced along the sacred path known as the Road of the Gods. Daenerys rode behind him on her silver horse, escorted by Sir Yoram Mormont and, at some distance, by Viserys, who once again stayed close, though under watch. Since the incident on the grass-covered plains, Kurse had not allowed Viserys to approach Daenerys, fearing another reckless outburst. Only after constant pleading and employing all the intimate arts her handmaid Doria had taught her did Daenerys manage to have Kurse forgive her brother and allow him to join the head of the procession. "Is this the god Thor Horsehead?" Daenerys asked, stroking her swollen belly as she observed the new bronze statues. Kurse nodded from his mount. At the side of the road, Viserys spoke in a tone heavy with restrained anger. "How much longer must we remain in these ruins before you give me an army?" Kurse replied with forced calm. "I've already told you. First we must consult the Dosh Kalain." Viserys clenched his teeth. "And what does your god have to do with me? I'm tired of eating horse meat every day and living surrounded by this stench." Noticing that Kurse's patience was beginning to wear thin, Sir Yoram Mormont intervened. "Your Grace, the goods of the Western market should satisfy you." "They had better," Viserys replied coldly, fixing Yora with a look full of contempt. Daenerys turned her head toward Kurse, with a pleading expression. "My sun and stars, when will they give my brother a crown?" For an instant, Kurse remembered the scene of the molten crown falling upon Viserys' head in another time, in another fate. "Soon," he finally replied. "Very soon, my dear." Daenerys smiled, satisfied. Kulkurs advanced through the city accompanied by his blood riders and an imposing army. Daenerys followed closely, watching with fascination the strange wonders that surrounded her. Ves Dothrak was almost as large as 10 pentos put together, without walls or defined borders. The buildings took on diverse forms, filled with foreign styles. Some structures were simple wooden halls with roofs open to the sky, others were carved directly into stone and covered with intricate, beautiful, and primitive engravings, reflections of conquered cultures. "Why are all the buildings so different?" Daenerys asked. "They were built by captured slaves," Kurse explained. "Each one built according to their customs and beliefs." In a wide clearing, a crowd had gathered, forming a circle. At the center stood a woman of extraordinary beauty, with black hair streaked with white. It was Rhaenys Targaryen. Rhaenys spoke with a firm voice while caressing her swollen belly, as if drawing strength from the life she carried within. "The priestesses foretold that this day would come," she proclaimed. "When the red star bleeds and darkness gathers, the Ice Demon King will escape from hell and return to this world to sow chaos and destruction. The demon will call other demons and raise the dead who lie in hell to fight at his side." An uneasy murmur passed through the crowd. "But you must not fear," Rhaenys continued. "When the darkness is absolute and all seems lost, a true warrior will appear. A Dothraki warrior. The chosen of the god Thor Horsehead. He will awaken the extinct dragons, lead the peoples to war, and crush all his enemies, until they are reduced to dust." The wind swept along the road of the gods, and for an instant, even the blood riders felt a chill. Chapter 11, Viserys meets his niece. Viserys wandered through the market with his soul weighed down by bitterness. The bustle of V's Dothraki, the smells of roasted meat and cured leather, and the curious stares of the Dothraki only intensified his sense of humiliation. That savage city was no place for a king. Just as he was about to turn back, a voice caught his attention. It was a speech. Viserys stopped when he recognized the common tongue. As he drew closer, he clearly heard the words of a woman speaking of prophecies, bleeding stars, and ice demons. He could not help letting out a mocking laugh. Only ignorant barbarians would believe in nonsense like prophecies and divinations. The woman lifted her gaze when she heard him. Her eyes were calm, deep, and showed neither fear nor anger. The conqueror saw the prophecy of fire and ice in his dreams, she replied serenely. A prophecy that House Targaryen has passed down from generation to generation. She paused briefly and shook her head. I force no one to believe my words. If you do not wish to listen, you may leave. Viserys' blood boiled. How dare you tell me what to do, he roared. I am the king. Rhaenys blinked, clearly surprised. She studied him closely, as if evaluating a stranger, or a madman. Are you out of your mind? She asked. Do you truly believe you are the king? Those words were like a spark in a powder keg. You are not permitted to speak to me like that. Viserys shouted. Ser Jorah, who was standing behind him, stepped forward and raised his voice with formality. Viserys III of House Targaryen, King of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms and Protector of the Realm. An uncomfortable silence followed the proclamation. Then, a guard standing behind the woman stepped forward. Rhaenys Targaryen, he announced. Daughter of Prince Rhaegar Targaryen and Princess Elia Martell. Survivor of the sack of King's Landing when she was still a child. Second chosen of the god Thor Horsehead and first wife of Kulkurs. The words fell like thunder. Jorah and Viserys were petrified. Rhaenys let out a brief laugh. Greetings, dear uncle, she said softly. At last, we meet. Viserys reacted as if he had been bitten. Rhaenys Targaryen died in King's Landing, he shouted. She was murdered years ago. Do you think I'm an idiot? And look at your hair. It's black. You are definitely not a true Targaryen. He raised his voice with contempt. We Targaryens have violet eyes and silver gold hair. Like Daenerys. The woman before him did not fit that image, and that alone was enough for Viserys to mock her in his mind. She's just trying to pass herself off as my niece to steal my throne, he thought furiously. Believe it or not, I am a true Targaryen, Rhaenys replied calmly. My appearance comes from my mother. My husband, Kulkurs, can attest to that. At first, Viserys wanted to dismiss her as a jealous fraud. But something stopped him. He looked at her more closely. The angle of her face. The shape of her gaze. An unsettling echo of Rhaegar's face, his older brother. His heart sank. If that was true, there was no reason at all to feel relieved. She was already married to Kurse. He had given Daenerys away in exchange for an army. If he had known that Rhaenys was still alive and already the wife of that savage, he would never have allowed that marriage. He would have used his sister. Or his niece. After all, the Targaryens had always protected their blood through marriages between relatives. No one within their lineage saw that as unnatural. If not for his obsession with reclaiming the Iron Throne, he would never have handed Daenerys over to a barbarian. But now the situation was intolerable. The savage had 2 women with dragon blood. 2. He would not allow this to continue. He would order Kurse to return Daenerys to him, or to give him Rhaenys. He did not care what had happened between them and that man. He did not care if they already carried bastards in their wombs. As long as one gave him an army of tens of thousands. And the other ensured heirs with dragon blood. That would be enough. Chapter 12, Whipping the King of the Seven Kingdoms. Viserys clenched his teeth. Resentment, humiliation, and rage boiled in his chest until they overflowed. With a sharp movement, he drew his sword and pointed it directly at Renis's neck. He was about to threaten her. To demand that she divorce Curse, or force that savage to return his sister to him. Then it happened. A dry crack cut through the air. Before Viserys could react, a whip whistled and coiled around his throat. A brutal force dragged him backward, ripping him off the ground like a weightless doll. The attacker was a child. He could not have been more than 9 or 10 years old. His skin was pale, his hair black as night, and his eyes, violet eyes, deep and sharp as blades. His canines protruded unnaturally, resembling fangs, and his long nails looked more like claws than human fingers. He was Maegor II Targaryen, son of Curse and Rhaenys Targaryen. He had arrived moments earlier with a small group of riders, just in time to see his mother threatened. He was shouting furiously in Dothraki. Viserys' body was hurled backward and crashed heavily onto the ground. Dust rose around him as he struggled to breathe. Maegor's eyes burned with fury. "Mother," he shouted in the common tongue, with a childish voice filled with hatred, "I'm going to kill this bad man." Rhaenys watched the pathetic figure of her uncle writhing on the ground. In her chest rose a bitter, conflicting emotion, revulsion, and a faint pity. "Release him," she said at last. "Forgive him this time. After all, he is my uncle. He is family." She turned toward Viserys and spoke with dangerous calm. "You had better behave, if you wish to keep living." Maegor snorted coldly. Before obeying, he snapped the whip one more time. The impact sent Viserys crashing into the ground again, tearing a muffled groan from him. "How dare you!" Viserys shrieked, red with fury and humiliation. "How dare you touch me! I am your king!" He struggled to his feet, trembling, and pointed a finger at Rhaenys. "You claim to be my niece, but you, little whore of the Horse King, have no right to order me around. Do you hear me? I am the son of a true dragon. The rightful ruler of the 7 kingdoms." Rhaenys did not respond. But her son did. The whip cracked through the air like thunder. It coiled around Viserys' throat once more and hurled him backward again. This time he fell breathless, convulsing in the dust. The Dothraki riders watching burst into laughter, jeers, and mockery. Maegor held the whip firmly and asked in the common tongue, with a crooked smile. "What happens if I whip the king of the 7 kingdoms now?" A servant translated his words. The laughter multiplied. Maegor did not wait for an answer. The whip fell again. "Damn bastard!" Viserys screamed in a broken voice. He desperately turned his head toward Ser Jorah. "Mormont! Help me! Your king commands you. Kill this little monster. Kill these lackeys and this false niece." Ser Jorah stepped forward. He placed his hand on the hilt of his sword, and then withdrew it. He looked at Viserys for a long moment, and then at Rhaenys. "Please," he said in a deep voice, "spare his life." Viserys stared at him in disbelief. Then he dropped to his knees in the dust. He said nothing more. But his eyes were full of hatred. Rhaenys made a gesture with her hand. Maegor released the whip. Viserys lay on the ground, breathing with difficulty. A line of blood ran down his back and pooled beneath his chin. He clutched his throat, unable to speak. Rhaenys remained silent for a few seconds before speaking. "We will wait for my husband to return," she said at last. "Then it will be decided what to do with you." Maegor sighed and lowered his head, disappointed, like a child whose favorite toy has been taken away. "As you command, mother." "Take him away," Rhaenys ordered Ser Jorah. "I just hit him," Maegor said later, with a mix of pride and amazement. "I hit the king of the 7 kingdoms. The descendant of the true dragon." "Do you think Curse will be angry when he returns?" one of the riders asked nervously. Maegor snorted. "I also have dragon blood. But, he is the true king. After all, he is. Magur looked at them with a mocking smile, twirling the whip between his fingers. Don't say foolish things. Do you really think my father will give him the throne? The riders fell silent. Then Renis spoke, slow but firm, with absolute certainty in her voice. My uncle will never be king. Chapter 13, The news reaches King's Landing. At that very same moment, on the other side of the world, on the western continent of Westeros. King's Landing. The largest city of the Seven Kingdoms stretched like an open wound beside the narrow sea. 500,000 souls were crammed among narrow alleyways, blackened rooftops, and overflowing sewers. The stench was constant, sweat, urine, and excrement mingled under the sun, a perfume impossible to erase even with incense and flowers. That day, however, the city was celebrating. The tournament organized by King Robert Baratheon was more magnificent than any other in recent years. To celebrate the arrival of his new hand, Eddard Stark, Robert had added 10,000 gold dragons to the champion's prize. The crowd roared with every clash of lances, and the nobles drank and laughed as if the world held no hidden threats. Robert sat in the royal box, laughing loudly at the spectacle of steel and blood unfolding below. Then, a shadow slipped in behind him. Varys, the master of whisperers, leaned in and murmured by his ear. Your Majesty, there is bad news. The remnants of the Targaryens have appeared. Robert's laughter cut off abruptly. His face flushed, the muscles in his neck tightened, and with a roar filled with fury, he rose to his feet. Call a royal council. Silence spread through the box like a stain of oil. Eddard Stark, seeing the king's expression, felt a bad premonition. That man who seemed to live only for wine, hunting, and prostitutes, never called councils without reason. And when he did, blood usually followed. Royal Council. The doors closed behind them with a heavy thud. As soon as they entered, Ned turned toward Varys. What happened? The eunuch did not beat around the bush. My lord, word has arrived that the supposed son of Rhaegar, Aegon, has appeared in Dorne. He has declared that after reclaiming the Iron Throne, he will take Arianne Martell as his wife. Ned frowned. Aegon Targaryen. Wasn't that child killed during the sack of King's Landing? Varys shrugged ambiguously. Who can say? Perhaps he is a pretender, someone passing himself off as a dragon. But Oberyn Martell claims to have seen him with his own eyes. He swears the boy appeared before him out of nowhere, a miracle sent by the Seven, rescued by the gods. A murmur ran through the chamber. Robert waved a hand dismissively. Nonsense. Some old Targaryen loyalist probably hid him, just like they did with the Mad King's boy and girl. Varys nodded slowly. And there is more. From Lys come rumors that Daenerys Targaryen has married a certain Kulkurs, a lord of the Dothraki horsemen. Robert's face twisted with anger. Daenerys marrying a savage, he growled. We should send her a wedding gift. He paused, his eyes gleaming with cruelty. A sword. Very sharp. In the hands of a good assassin. Ned stepped forward. Your Majesty, she is nothing but a child. You won't do such a thing, you won't become another Tywin Lannister. Robert slammed his fist onto the table. The crash echoed through the room. That whore won't take long to give birth to bastards. Bastards with dragon blood who will cross the narrow sea to attack us. And don't forget that idiot Viserys, calling himself king. I want them dead. Murdering a child is shameful, Ned replied firmly. Robert's voice rose even higher. She won't take long to spread her legs and fill the world with dragon spawn that will bring me trouble. He took a deep breath, but the rage did not fade. What the Mad King did to your brother Brandon was shameful. The death of your father was shameful. And Rhaegar, that damned bastard. How many times do you think he raped my Lyanna? She was meant to be my wife, my queen. He pointed a trembling finger at Ned. I will kill them all. All the Targaryens. I will give them a death worthy of dragons, and then I will piss on their graves." Peter Baelish, with his eternal calm smile, interjected. "As long as the Dothraki remain on the other side of the narrow sea, what is there to fear? Even with millions of riders?" Ned nodded. "They have no ships. And they fear the sea." Robert leaned back on the throne, feigning indifference. "And that Aegon? Has he said anything else?" Varys inclined his head. "He claims to have more supporters in the Seven Kingdoms. Aside from the Martells, he mentions the Tyrells." Ned pondered. "Perhaps he is trying to sow discord." Robert grunted. "Or perhaps he has already made contact with them. There are still those who call me usurper. Have you forgotten how many houses fought for the dragons?" He clenched his teeth. "Now they hide. But when they smell blood, they will try to kill me, and my children." Ned held his gaze, firm as the north. "If they dare, we will fight together. And we will defeat them." But deep within the chamber, even as Ned's words echoed, no one could deny the silent truth. The dragons, real or false, were awakening. And chaos had already begun. Chapter 14, The Prophecy. Culcurs led Daenerys to the enormous pit located at the heart of Ves Dothrak, the sacred navel of the Dothraki people. The place was steeped in a cold, solemn gloom. The air descended along the walls of the pit like an ancient breath, heavy with echoes and superstition. There, a group of Dosh Kalain, wrapped in strange, worn garments, moved with ritual slowness as they prepared the ceremony. In ancient times, that ritual required devouring the raw heart of a horse. Curse had changed it. Tonight, the heart would not be eaten. It would be offered to the flames. There were many gods in the world, but very few were real. Culcurs did not know for certain how many of those gods truly deserved the name, but he was completely sure of one thing: the so-called horse god of the Dothraki was not one of them. Now, all the Dosh Kalain were under his authority. Curse stopped before the priestesses, holding a still beating heart in both hands. Blood dripped slowly, and the steam rising from the warm flesh climbed into the night air, forming an almost unnatural contrast with the chill of the pit. Behind him, his blood riders knelt on one knee. They gripped short stone knives, still stained red, beside the corpse of a freshly sacrificed wild horse. Curse stepped forward and placed the heart before one of the priestesses. His hands were covered in blood up to the elbows. Behind her stood the other crones in a line, witches withered by time, faces carved with deep wrinkles and eyes that gleamed like flint in the firelight. Daenerys watched from not far away. She kept her gaze fixed on the priestess, though her stomach churned. She swallowed and forced herself to endure. The crones began to chant. Their voices deep and harsh echoed through the pit as if awakening something that slept within the earth. Eunuchs added hay to a great bronze brazier, and the dry scent spread quickly. The smoke rose straight toward the sky, seeking the moon and the stars. Then the priestess lifted the heart and cast it into the fire. "For Thor, horsehead," she intoned. The heart crackled as it touched the flames. Silence fell all at once. Curse could hear the distant song of nocturnal birds, the crackle of torches, the gentle lapping of the lake. The Dothraki waited, motionless, expecting the prophecy. At last, the one-eyed crone opened her single eye. She raised her arms. "I saw his face," she announced in a trembling voice, "and I heard the thunder of his hooves." "His hooves sound like thunder." The others answered in unison. "His horse was as swift as the wind." Behind him rode a Khalasar that covered the whole earth, countless as the stars. Their araks were as sharp as silver grass. The words seemed to flow without pause. "The prince will be mighty as a storm. His enemies will tremble before him. The wives of his enemies will weep and sing laments. The bells in his hair will sing his coming, and those who live in stone tents will fear his name." The crone turned her gaze toward Daenerys. "The prince rides a horse, and he will ride upon the stallion of the world." "Riding the stallion of the world!" The crowd roared. The clamor filled the night. Curse smiled. It was exactly as he had foreseen. Everything had been arranged in advance. Even so, he could not help but recall the original fate of the son of Daenerys and Khal Drogo. In the tales of A Song of Ice and Fire, gods abounded: Arhillar, the old gods, the drowned god, the god of cold, the black goat, and the seven, whose existence had always been doubtful. But the prophecies of the horse god never came true. Neither in the books nor in the stories did Daenerys's children survive blood magic. The words of the Dosh Kalain always ended as smoke. From the perspective of prophetic accuracy, that god was false. That reinforced Kurst's conviction: he could reshape that religion without fear of any punishment. The one-eyed crone fixed her eye on Daenerys. What is the name of the horse that rides the world? Daenerys instinctively brought her hand to her swollen belly, caressing it gently. His name will be Rhaego Targaryen. A deafening roar erupted among the Dothraki. Rhaego! 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 Kurst looked at Daenerys, surprised. The name was the same as in the original Destiny. They had already agreed that the child would bear the Targaryen surname, but the name, that he had left to her. Though the choice caught him off guard, he accepted it. Then he stepped forward. His gaze locked onto the priestesses. Will my conquest of Westeros proceed without problems? The crones looked at one another and began another ritual. Their chanting intensified, and the flames of the brazier danced, lighting their faces with a savage glow. After a long moment, they spoke. The Horse King will emerge victorious in the conquest of Westeros. There was wonder in their voices. Almost reverence. Cheers burst forth. The Dothraki filled with renewed hope. A satisfied smile appeared on Kurst's face. He turned to Daenerys, took her hand, and drew her close. She looked at him with affection. Glories or calamities, she would follow him. As they left the pit, Kurst had already received news of the confrontation between Viserys, Rhaenys, and Maegor. As he walked beneath the star-filled sky, he began to form a plan. Viserys. It was time to decide what to do with him. Chapter 15, The Celebration. Kurst, after leaving Daenerys resting in her chambers, decided to hold a banquet. Only his eldest son, Maegor Targaryen, accompanied him, who was barely 4 years old. However, due to his abnormally strong and developed physique, the child appeared to be at least 12. The banquet not only celebrated the fulfilled prophecy, but also marked the beginning of preparations for the war that was approaching. The air of the hall was saturated with the aroma of roasted meat, hot grease, and fermented mare's milk. When Kurst entered, the place was already boiling with life. Warriors, riders, and lesser khals filled the space with laughter, hoarse voices, and the clash of cups. All conversations revolved around Daenerys. The Dothraki enthusiastically commented on her swollen belly, applauded the small life growing within her, and spoke fervently of the future son of the prophecy, the one destined to ride the stallion of the world. Many khals of lesser khalasars began making decisions right there. They resolved to temporarily settle in V's Dothrak, bring their best warriors, and follow Kurst in his next endeavor. Kurst raised his voice. My son Rhaego will be the prince who, according to the prophecy, will ride the stallion of the world and rule all the Dothraki. The reaction was immediate. Cups were raised, tables were struck, araks were waved in the air. The hall erupted in cheers. Ride the stallion of the world! Ride the stallion of the world! The eyes of many shone with longing, filled with faith in Kurst and in the future he promised. However, not everyone shared the same enthusiasm. One of the khals, with a relaxed expression and an apparently casual voice, asked while drinking. And your eldest son? The murmur slowly faded away. All eyes focused on Kurst. The khal's face hardened. He replied firmly. The god Thor Horsehead has foretold that his reign is not found on the continent of Westeros, but here, in Essos. Then he stepped forward. His voice boomed like thunder. I, Kurst, will not only guide you to the conquest of all Westeros, but also to the conquest of all Essos. He paused, letting his words sink in deeply, and then continued in a tone charged with ambition. We will conquer new lands. We will plunder greater riches. The hall erupted once more. The warriors roared, the arrax gleamed under the firelight, and Dothraki blood boiled with excitement. Meanwhile, in a room steeped in absolute silence, only Daenerys's measured breathing could be heard. A faint smile formed on her face as she tenderly caressed her belly. A sudden noise brought her back to reality. When she looked up, she saw a woman standing beside the bed. She recognized Rhaenys's face and could not hide her surprise. During the journey, Curse had spoken to her of her existence. She would be lying if she said it did not bother her. Although she knew the Dothraki customs, she could not help feeling jealous upon learning that Curse had another wife. And at the same time, she could not help feeling relief and joy upon discovering that she still had living family. 2 more relatives, if she also counted Rhaenys's son. Rhaenys, noticing the whirlwind of emotions reflected on Daenerys's face, stepped forward with concern and gently embraced her. Daenerys tensed at first, but soon relaxed when she felt the closeness of her blood. Rhaenys could not help smiling at how quickly her expressions changed. At last we meet, my dear aunt. In another room, anger burned in Viserys' heart like an unleashed storm. He wore a newly purchased crimson tunic, embroidered with the 3-headed dragon of House Targaryen. It was comfortable, luxurious, worthy of a king. But neither luxury nor good food managed to calm him. His rage burned more fiercely than any bonfire. He grabbed a bottle of wine and smashed it against the wall. The glass exploded into 1,000 fragments. "Damn barbarians!" he roared. His face was red, the veins on his forehead throbbed with fury. "Damn barbarians! How dare that bitch who pretends to be my niece and her little bastard strike and humiliate the great king of the 7 kingdoms," he shouted, his voice echoing through the room. Ser Jorah remained to one side, silent, his brow furrowed. "Your Majesty," he finally said cautiously, "it may be that what that woman said is true. Perhaps, she really is your niece." Viserys turned toward him, furious. "That bitch cannot be my niece. And if she is, then she must divorce Curse and marry me." He clenched his fists. "Curse already married my sister, and now they say he also secretly married my supposed niece." Jorah tried to speak, but Viserys interrupted him with a sharp gesture. "Curse is treating the noble king and my Iron Throne as if they were a joke." Ser Jorah fell silent. He knew that, no matter what he said, he would only succeed in further stoking Viserys' fury. Chapter 16, Poisoned Wine. After a long conversation, Rhaenys had achieved the unthinkable. She had sown calm in Daenerys's restless heart. Word by word, she dismantled the shadows cast by Viserys and elevated the figure of Curse until he became an inevitable destiny. "Your brother will never be king," Rhaenys said serenely, without harshness, as if she were speaking of a truth as simple as the dawn. "And Curse is the chosen one. Like it or not, the world is already moving around him." Daenerys lowered her gaze, carefully caressing her belly. "Doesn't it bother you that Curse has decided to name my son heir to the Iron Throne?" she finally asked, her voice a thin thread laden with insecurity. Rhaenys arched an eyebrow and smiled. "Well, you already have so much faith in our husband that you take it for granted he will conquer Westeros," she replied in a teasing tone. Then she shrugged. "The Iron Throne has always belonged to the Targaryens." "But you are also a Targaryen," Daenerys began. "A Targaryen who was supposed to be dead," Rhaenys interrupted her without a trace of bitterness. Her violet eyes shone with clarity. "It is much easier for the world to accept the son of the recognized Daenerys Targaryen than the supposed surviving Rhaenys Targaryen." She paused and smiled confidently. "Besides, Curse's ambition does not end with a single throne. When the time comes, what he will lack least will be lands to distribute among his heirs." Daenerys fell silent, stunned by the certainty of those words. That same night, Curse went outside with his eldest son after the celebration came to an end. The sky was clear, covered with stars that seemed to watch them in silence. Curse sighed as he looked at Mugger. The boy returned a wide, carefree smile. "Son, don't you blame your father for not giving you the Iron Throne?" Curse asked, with a hint of guilt. Mugger tilted his head, thoughtful. "Father, if I sat on that chair, would I have more food?" he asked with genuine curiosity. Curse blinked, taken aback. "Well, not exactly. In fact, you would probably eat less because you would be busy with matters of the crown." "Then I don't blame you," Mugger replied with complete naturalness, as if the throne were just another stone on the road. Curse stood there looking at him, not knowing whether to laugh or sigh. "Of course," he murmured, perplexed. A few days later, Daenerys and Rhaenys walked amid the bustle of the market, followed by their handmaidens. At a short distance, Curse, Viserys, and a group of guards accompanied them. Suddenly, the scent of fireworks caught Daenerys's attention. "Look!" she exclaimed enthusiastically, pointing at a stall. Her smile was radiant, almost childlike. For a moment, she was not a Khaleesi nor a promised queen, but a young woman discovering the world. Rhaenys walked at her side with a calm expression. Those places no longer surprised her, but seeing her aunt laugh made it worthwhile. There was something warm and fragile in that happiness. Viserys, on the other hand, walked forward with a scowl, muttering bitterly. When they reached the western part of the city, merchants were unloading goods without rest. Turning a corner, they came upon a wine stall. The aroma was intense and intoxicating. "Sweet red wine," the vendor shouted in fluent Dothraki. "From Lys, Volantis, and Arbor. White wine from Lys, pear brandy, fire wine, and pepper wine from Tyrosh. Wine of the green god, smoked berry wine, and sour wine from Myr. I have it all." He was a small, slender man, with a pleasant face and curly blonde hair, perfumed and carefully groomed. Upon seeing them, he bowed with exaggerated courtesy. "Would you like to taste some wine?" Curse remained silent, observing. Viserys was the first to accept. The merchant turned to the two women. "My ladies, I have a Dornish summer wine, made with honey plums, cherries, and black oak." Rhaenys shook her head. Daenerys, on the other hand, smiled shyly. "Just a sip, thank you." The merchant seemed surprised when they spoke. "Tyroshi, perhaps. I may dress like a Dothraki and speak with a foreign accent, but I am a woman of Westeros," Rhaenys replied. Doria stepped forward. "You have the honor of speaking with Princesses Daenerys Targaryen and Rhaenys Targaryen." The man immediately fell to his knees. "Your Highnesses! Rise," Rhaenys ordered. "I want to taste your wine," Daenerys said. The merchant smiled nervously. "The summer red is for Dornish pigs. I have something better. A dry wine from the island of Qingting. Sweet and refreshing. Allow me to send you a cask." Mulgrew stepped forward to carry it. Viserys, impatient, was the first to drink. Ser Jorah watched, tense, but did not stop him. The merchant poured another cup for Daenerys. Before she could take it, a voice cut through the air. "Wait!" Curse's voice was harsh, laden with fury. "Mulgrew, leave the cask." At that instant, all the pieces fell into place. The sense of familiarity struck him like lightning. He remembered the story. He remembered the book. He looked at Ser Jorah, who was about to move forward. In the original story, he was supposed to stop it. But this time, Jorah had stopped no one. Not Daenerys. Not Viserys. And that made the danger even greater. Chapter 17, The Death of Viserys. Curse took the cup of wine between his fingers, slightly furrowed his brow, and brought it to his nose. He inhaled slowly, as if he wanted to memorize every nuance of the aroma. The wine merchant maintained a flattering smile on his face, but his legs were visibly trembling under Kirst's gaze. "Smells good, doesn't it?" he said in an overly enthusiastic voice. Although he tried to appear relaxed, Daenerys and Rhaenys noticed the drops of sweat sliding down his forehead, betraying a nervousness impossible to hide. Suddenly, Viserys let his cup fall. The wine spilled onto the ground just before he lost his balance and fell heavily face first. Dust rose in a chaotic cloud. The merchant reacted immediately. With a choked cry, he grabbed the wine cask with both hands and hurled it with all his strength toward Kurs. Kurs moved with terrifying speed. His leg rose and struck the cask in midair, violently deflecting it. But the merchant did not stop. From within his clothes he drew a dagger and threw it straight at Daenerys. Kurs lunged toward her without hesitation, shoving her forcefully out of its path. The dagger whistled through the air. Daenerys screamed, lost her balance, and nearly fell. "Dany!" Rhaenys shouted, instinctively moving forward to catch her. The merchant, without looking back, ran off like a cornered animal down the market passage. Kurst's eyes locked onto his back with brutal intensity. They were not the eyes of a man, but of a predator. The crack of a whip cut through the air. The whip shot out and wrapped with precision around the merchant's ankle. He fell flat on his face against the ground, raising a cloud of dust as he screamed in pain. The caravan guards arrived immediately, their steps quick and coordinated. The caravan leader appeared shortly after. His face was hard as old leather. He was short, broad, and solid, with a bluish beard that reached his ears. He took in the scene in a single glance. He asked no questions. "Take this man away and let the Khal decide his fate," he ordered in a firm voice. Two guards seized the merchant, who struggled and pleaded amid groans. "Your Highness Khal Kurs," the leader continued with a slight tone of apology, "please accept all of his wine as a gift. It is a small compensation. It is a disgrace that someone from our caravan attempted to poison your guests." Rhaenys, still trembling, instinctively placed a hand on her belly, as if trying to protect the life growing within her. But Kurs was not finished. He strode forward, grabbed the merchant by the neck, and lifted him off the ground as if he weighed nothing. His voice was low, deep, and dangerous. "You have offended my person and my wives." The dry sound of bone breaking echoed in the air. Then another. The merchant screamed in pain as his arm and leg hung at impossible angles. Kurs released him and turned toward the caravan leader. "I hope he receives the punishment he deserves." Then he added, his voice hoarse, laden with implacable determination. "The man who was selling a parrot was also behaving strangely. Go after him and bring him to me." The caravan leader bowed his head without argument. Meanwhile, Kurst's guards escorted Daenerys and Rhaenys back. Daenerys's eyes filled with tears. Fear returned to her mouth like a bitter taste she knew all too well. For years she had lived in fear of Viserys. But now the fear was different, deeper. She feared losing her husband. Her niece. Her unborn child. Rhaenys approached and whispered in her ear. "Aunt, you have the blood of a true dragon running through your veins." She held her tightly. The descendants of the true dragon do not know fear. When Kurs returned, Daenerys was the first to approach him. Her voice trembled. "My sun and stars, are you all right?" Rhaenys said nothing. She took Kurst's face between her hands, her eyes full of tears, and kissed him fiercely. The warmth of that gesture pierced Kurst's heart. He gently stroked both of their hair. "I'm fine, my loves. I'm just tired." Then he looked at Daenerys seriously. "But your brother?" Daenerys swallowed. "Viserys? What happened to him?" Kurs remained silent for a moment. He knew his words would be a heavy blow. "Viserys is dead," he finally said. "He died from the poison." Daenerys felt as if an invisible hand loosened around her throat. She felt relief. And that relief filled her with guilt. Tears burst forth uncontrollably. "I wanted to save him," Kurs added in a muted voice. "But when help arrived, it was already too late. Daenerys whispered, broken. What will become of the future of House Targaryen without Viserys? Rhaenys placed a firm hand on her back. Then the task of restoring the dynasty will fall to us. Kerse smiled calmly. And me? I am also part of this. Together we will return glory to House Targaryen. Daenerys embraced them both for a long time. Then she lifted her face and kissed Kerse with resolve. Chapter 18, Las Consecuencias Políticas de la Muerte de Viserys. The news did not spread immediately, but when it did, it was like a stone thrown into a lake of apparent calm. The ripples travelled far, faster than anyone expected. Viserys Targaryen was dead. The last recognized male of the direct line of Aerys II had been extinguished in Dothraki lands, without a crown, without an army, and without a throne. But even in death, his name still carried weight. In Kerse's Khalasar. To the Dothraki, Viserys had never been more than an annoying guest, a weak man who spoke too much of invisible crowns. However, his death marked a before and an after. There was no longer a beggar king. Only Daenerys Targaryen remained, wife of Kerse, bearer of the prophesied child and now the only legitimate and visible figure of House Targaryen in the eyes of the world. That consolidated her position immediately. The lesser Khals, who until then had seen Daenerys as a useful symbol, began to see her as a political pillar. Her blood was no longer shared. There were no brothers, uncles, or male cousins to dispute her place. And more importantly, there was no one left whom Kerse could use as an intermediary. Daenerys was no longer a bargaining chip. She was the queen. In Essos, rumors, speculation, and opportunities. In the free cities, the news travelled wrapped in contradictory rumors. Some said Viserys had been poisoned by merchants to gain the favour of the usurper. Others claimed Kerse had eliminated him to secure his hold over Daenerys. The most astute suspected something darker, an invisible hand moving pieces. Illyrio Mopatis, upon hearing the news, did not celebrate. He frowned. Viserys had always been a clumsy piece, but he was a piece. A paper king who could be proclaimed, manipulated, and sacrificed when necessary. Now that option was gone. Daenerys, on the other hand, was not so easy to control. She had a Khal at her side, a real army, and a legitimacy that no longer depended on anyone else. For men like Illyrio and Varys, this was not a victory. It was a problem. In Westeros, the bored titans. In King's Landing, the news arrived distorted, filtered through spies and merchants. The dragon's brother has died in Essos. Robert Baratheon laughed when he heard it. One less madman, he said, raising his cup. But Jonaryn did not smile. The death of Viserys removed one threat, and strengthened another. Daenerys Targaryen was no longer under the shadow of an unstable brother. Now she was a political widow without a king, free to become something worse. A mother. And the name that began to circulate among the whispers was unsettling. The Khal's child. A child with Dothraki and dragon blood. An heir raised far from Westeros. A symbol impossible to predict. That set off alarms. Not because the invasion was imminent, but because it could no longer be controlled from within. The problem of legitimacy. Viserys, with all his flaws, had something that Daenerys had not yet openly claimed. The traditional male title that many lords of Westeros still respected. His death forced the Targaryen loyalists to make an uncomfortable decision. Would they follow a woman? Would they follow an unborn child? Or would they seek another dragon to claim? And there the true danger began. Because when a lineage fragments, impostors appear. Men of dubious blood. Hidden bastards. Supposed survivors. The vacuum Viserys left behind was not silence. It was an invitation. The shadow of the other travelers. For those who truly watched the flow of time, Viserys' death was not an accident. It was a point of divergence. An event that should not have occurred so soon. The other travelers felt it like a shock. Some smiled. Others frowned. The beggar king was meant to live longer. He was meant to fail more. He was meant to push Daenerys down a specific path. Now that path had changed. And in that change, the world became more dangerous. Because when a piece disappears too early, the board does not rebalance. It breaks. Chapter 19, On the Way to Alhazareen. Inside the tent there was only a pool of blood. There was no trace left of the bird caretaker, except for that dark, thick mirror that had not yet finished cooling. The metallic smell mixed with cheap incense, creating a heavy, almost unbreathable atmosphere. In Kulkurst's tent, the flickering firelight made his features already harsh by nature seem carved from shadow. His eyes remained fixed on the entrance, but his mind was very far from there. The matter of the wine merchant had been resolved. That of the bird seller as well. But there was another problem that did not bleed so easily. Jorah Mormont. Kurse narrowed his eyes. As a spy for the Iron Throne, Jorah undoubtedly knew about the assassination plan in advance. It was not an assumption, but an uncomfortable certainty. In the original story, the bear had redeemed his betrayal through love, saving Daenerys at the last moment and breaking forever with Westeros. But this world no longer followed that script exactly. He had not stopped Viserys. He had not warned Daenerys. And, worse still, he had shown an unsettling eagerness to drink the wine himself. That was not loyalty. It was poorly contained ambition. Kurse planted his fist against the table. Jorah looked at Daenerys in the wrong way. Not like a sworn knight, but like a man beginning to convince himself that he could occupy a place that did not belong to him. Perhaps he even thought that, in time, he could replace him. That thought was dangerous. And yet, Kurse knew what Jorah was capable of on the battlefield. He also knew that his loyalty, once fully given, was fierce and absolute. A warrior like that was not easily found. A counselor hardened by exile and defeat was even rarer. Eliminating him now would be simple. But losing him could cost dearly in the future. Doubt settled in his chest like a thorn. Finally, he raised his hand. Mulgrew, he ordered, bring me ambitious men. Men who wish to rise. When the warriors gathered before his tent, Kurse wasted no time. I want you to bring me Linus Hightower, he said firmly. The favorite lover of Trigger Ormalin, the merchant prince of Lys. A murmur ran through the group. One of the warriors, unable to restrain himself, spoke. I fear Prince Ormalin will not be willing to give up the woman he loves, Cole. Kurse let out a low laugh, heavy with disdain. He slowly turned toward the man. Who do you think I am? The warrior swallowed. Kurse took a step forward. I am the most powerful Cole of the Great Grass Sea. The one chosen by the god Thor Horsehead. The man who decides who trades, and who is ruined. His voice turned icy. Tell that prince this, if he does not hand over Linus, no goods will enter or leave Lys without paying a price he cannot afford. There were no further objections. Days later, the Khalasar departed V's Duthrak like a dark tide. They advanced southeast, crossing the vast, endless grasslands. The sound of thousands of hooves striking the earth spread like constant thunder. Kurse rode upon his majestic black horse, upright and imposing. At his side rode 3 figures, his eldest son, far too large for his age, and his 2 wives each bearing a different expression, but both aware that the world was changing. In the rear, 2 guards carried spears topped with human heads. One belonged to the wine seller. The other, to the bird seller. Silent warnings, visible to all. Kurse's eyes swept over his warriors one by one. In his chest burned a vast, almost unbearable ambition. It was not conquest alone that he desired. It was dominion. His first destination was not Mirian. It was Alhazar. The land of the lamb men. Shepherds and farmers, weak, clinging to the soil and their flocks. People accustomed to bowing their heads to plunder and praying to survive. Curse did not want to repeat Khal Drogo's history. He did not want ashes. He wanted submission. Lhazar would be the first example. The first land to learn that kneeling was not the end, but the beginning of a new way to survive. If the Dothraki were going to conquer the world, they first had to learn how to rule it. Chapter 20, The Surrender of Lhazareen. The sheep people shared with the Dothraki bronze-colored skin and almond-shaped eyes, similar enough that when Daenerys first arrived in Lhazareen, she mistook them at a glance. However, over time she began to notice clear, almost unsettling differences. Their faces were broader and flatter, their bodies sturdy, built for constant labor rather than war. They wore their hair cut in an unusual way, almost shaved to the scalp, a stark contrast to the long Dothraki braids, symbols of pride and victories never lost. "I made you my promise in Vis Dothrak." Khal Kurst's voice echoed throughout the camp, deep and authoritative, imposing silence even among the most belligerent. He raised his hand and pointed toward the city walls in the distance. "As your Khal, I allow you to plunder and to take the wives and concubines of others, for that is our ancient tradition." For an instant, some faces lit up. But Kurst's expression hardened immediately, and his voice rose with an almost sacred weight. "But I must also announce rules. Rules that will ensure our victory is not brief, but lasting." The camp held its breath. First, slave trading and indiscriminate slaughter will not be permitted. An uneasy murmur ran through the warriors. Second, the god Thor Horsehead commands that we respect the beliefs of the sheep people. Their temples and priests are not to be profaned. Some Khals frowned. Third, the burning of houses and buildings is forbidden. Kurst paused briefly, letting his words sink in. These rules exist to milk more mare's milk, not to kill a mare that can still produce. Finally, his voice lowered, laden with warning. "Anyone who disobeys my orders will suffer the consequences." After the speech, the atmosphere of the camp grew tense, heavy. The lesser Khals exchanged glances, their eyes reflecting hesitation and discontent. They had followed Kurst for promises of wealth and plunder, not to submit to restrictions imposed by another Khal. However, Kurst's prestige as the chosen of the god Thor Horsehead shone like the highest star in the firmament, unreachable and imposing. Even the dissatisfied lacked the courage necessary to challenge him openly. They watched one another, searching for someone who would dare to take the first step. No one did. In the end, all that remained was silent commitment. After all, Kurst was the father of the horse that would mount the world. Following him meant betting on a future of even greater conquests. Among the warriors, only a few showed open indignation, annoyed at being unable to enjoy the pleasure of killing and ravaging. Their faces were tense, as if a sacred right had been stripped from them. By contrast, the blood riders and bandits who had followed Kurst for longer reacted differently. In their gazes there was understanding. Acceptance. They knew that this Khal did not think like the others. Kurst's sharp eyes passed over the faces of his warriors one by one, reading their emotions as if they were visible scars. He exhaled slowly. Blocking everyone's desires was dangerous, but this time it had worked. Under his orders, the Dothraki army moved into action, surrounding Lhazareen with speed and silence. The city was small, with low, deteriorated walls, marked by years and neglect. The packed earth walls looked fragile, as if a gust of wind could bring them down. To the east, Mulgro commanded 32,000 elite warriors, their araks gleaming with lethal edges, their faces hardened by determination. To the west, Khal Kurst led a similar force. He rode his imposing black horse, watching the city like a patient predator. Any resistance would be crushed beneath iron hooves. To the south, Khal Moro directed a coalition of 10,000 lesser Khals, armed with bows and araks, prepared to serve as bait if necessary. When the Dothraki vanguard appeared on the horizon, the sentinels of Lhazareen were paralyzed by horror. The alarm bells began to ring, sharp and rapid, shattering the stillness of dawn. Sparse and poorly equipped guards appeared atop the walls, their small figures brutally contrasting with the tide of riders approaching. They wore hastily fitted leather armor, and the weapons they wielded seemed primitive compared to refined Dothraki gear. The city gates slammed shut, iron bolts locking with a heavy, almost desperate sound. Archers lined the walls. They were outnumbered, but even so they prepared to defend their homes. Their movements were clumsy, lacking the instinctive ferocity of the riders of the Grass Sea. From above, the sheep people soldiers watched the armies advance and despair took hold of them. They knew who the Dothraki were. They knew what they usually did. At the foot of the wall, Kulkurs advanced on horseback. His voice burst like thunder across the battlefield. Men of the city of Alhazareen, listen. I am Kulkurs, chosen of the god Thor Horsehead, lord of the horses of the great Grass Sea. He paused, letting fear settle. If you surrender, my warriors will not kill indiscriminately. But if you resist, there will be countless dead. The Dothraki will kill every man taller than a wheel. His gaze was cold. The god Thor Horsehead does not like the blood of innocents to stain this land. Lay down your arms, open the gates, and I will do everything possible to guarantee your safety. On the wall, the guards began to murmur, exchanging panic-filled glances. They knew Kulkurs's reputation. They knew Dothraki brutality. When the silence dragged on too long, Kurs was about to give the order to attack. Then an unexpected movement caught his attention. An old man, dressed in a fine wool sweater, appeared panting atop the wall. His face was furrowed by years, and his eyes shone with anxiety. In clumsy Dothraki, with a strange accent, he shouted. Great Kulkurs! We surrender! We surrender voluntarily! He was the leader of one of Alhazareen's most prestigious families. His mere presence was enough for the guards to turn toward him, knowing that, in that instant, the city's fate had just been sealed. Chapter 21, Victoria's Banquet. Some of the guards began to argue in low voices, fear tightening around their throats. If we surrender, one whispered, what will happen to our families and our homes? Another, with sunken eyes and a dry voice, answered with brutal honesty. If handing over our wives, our children, and our wealth allows us to keep breathing tomorrow, why not do it? The words fell like stones. They all knew it. Surrender could buy them time, nothing more. They would save their lives, yes, but at the cost of their dignity, their freedom, everything that made them free men. The silence became unbearable. Then one of the guards stepped forward. He was young, his armor ill-fitting and his hands shaking, but his eyes burned with desperate resolve. Anyone who wants to escape, follow me, he shouted hoarsely. He clenched his teeth, as if he had just accepted his own death, and ran along the wall. His gesture was like a spark in a dry field. Some hesitated. Others followed him almost immediately. Nearly 100 men ran after him, driven more by panic than by hope. They descended the wall with clumsy but determined steps, opened the city's southern gate, and rode out at a gallop, mounting half-saddled horses and throwing themselves into a desperate flight. From a distance, Kulkurs watched the scene with unsettling calm. There was no anger on his face. Only calculation. He turned to Mulgrew and the other blood riders. Do not harm the old man who surrendered, he ordered firmly. And as for those who flee, try to capture them alive. The orders spread swiftly, from mouth to mouth, like a lethal whisper rippling through the Dothraki ranks. By then, the battle for Alhazareen was already over. Not with fire. Not with massacre. But with submission. That same night, Kulkurs held a feast in the conquered city. The central square burned with great bonfires, and the aroma of roasted lamb filled the air, thick and tempting. There was laughter, singing, clashing cups, and deep guffaws. But beneath that thunderous joy hid silent tears. The tables overflowed with sheep and goats prepared in every imaginable way, slowly roasted, stewed with herbs, boiled until the meat fell from the bone. The sheep people had handed over more than 1,000 shepherd warriors as a sign of submission, along with enough provisions to feed the Kalasar for days. They also sent women. The girls sat beside the Dothraki, on their laps or at their feet. Some stared at the ground. Others smiled with a docility learned through blows of fear. No matter how crude the gestures or the hands, none resisted. When I grow up, I'll defeat all my enemies like my father, Magur laughed, raising a small toy sword. No one will be able to block my blade. Curse laughed with him a brief, sincere laugh, before his expression hardened. He stood and spoke to the warriors around him. These shepherds have shown courage, he said. Not all of them fled. They did not kneel without thought. They will join us. They will be part of us. The Dothraki responded with laughter, chest beating, and shouts of approval. Curse's authority was being reinforced, not only by victory, but by the way he had achieved it. Just then, the old man who had led the surrender appeared before him. He advanced hunched over, accompanied by several shepherd girls. He knelt awkwardly, his voice trembling like a leaf in the wind. Greatkull of the great grass sea. Chosen of the horse-headed god Thor, he said. On behalf of the three principal clans of Valhazareen, we offer you the most beautiful girls of our people. Curse observed the group. Short hair, filthy and torn woolen clothes, thin bodies marked by labor and hunger. None compared to Daenerys or Rhaenys. Instinctively, he looked toward his wives. Rhaenys watched him with an empty, distant expression, as if the decision did not belong to her. Daenerys, on the other hand, was not looking at him. She was looking at the girls. Her eyes were filled with pity, with deep sadness, and with an emotion she herself could not name. Some of the girls smelled of manure and sweat. Others could barely keep their heads raised. Curse was silent for a moment. Then he spoke. You may divide these women among yourselves, he said to the Khals and Blood Riders. But do not harm them. Treat them well. The response was immediate. The Dothraki warriors surged toward the girls with laughter and shouts, raising cups and weapons. Thank you for your generosity, great and powerful Kull, they cried. We will remember your kindness. Daenerys closed her eyes. She knew that was not kindness. But she also knew that, in that cruel world, it was the closest they had ever come to it. Chapter 22, Mirai Mazdur. A warrior of the sheep people pushed his way hurriedly through the Dothraki and knelt before Kull Curse. His voice was trembling, but solemn. The priestess who serves the great shepherd in the temple wishes to speak with you. The murmuring was immediate. The Dothraki warriors frowned, some spat on the ground, others laughed with contempt. Priestess! Curse murmured softly, calmly turning the small dagger between his fingers. In his eyes gleamed a mixture of caution and curiosity. Daenerys turned pale. She remembered the stories Yahiki told around the campfire, tales of witches who spoke with demons, women who stole souls and twisted fate with words whispered to the fire. MPH, she's just a witch. Let me go and burn her. Magur growled with a savage grin. Hey! Before he could finish, Rhaenys struck him sharply on the head. She glared at him, and the boy shrank back, rubbing his skull. Kull Curse rose to his feet. His voice was firm, deep, impossible to ignore. Thor Horsehead commands us to respect the beliefs of other peoples, even those of the Lamb folk. Whoever shows disrespect to foreign gods must apologize. As he spoke, his mind went much further. I spent years studying the god of the Dothraki before daring to shape their faith, he thought. Before acting, I must know whether this great shepherd is merely a statue, or something more. Curse turned to the sheep warrior. Show me the way. Wait, Michael. I will go with you, Mulgrew intervened at once, stepping forward. There is no need, Curse replied without looking at him. Stay here. Protect my wives and my children. Mulgrew clenched his fists, on the verge of protesting. He never did. Curse moved suddenly, grabbed him with one hand, and hurled him several steps back as if he were a child. The impact kicked up dust. Curse bent down until he was face to face with him and spoke softly, but with heavy authority. Believe me when I say that I can face anyone who stands against me. That is precisely why you will protect my family. Mulgrew swallowed and nodded. From a few steps back, Sir Yora watched the scene with his stomach tightening. He had seen strong men before, but never anyone lift another adult with one hand and no visible effort. Curse followed the sheep warrior to the temple. The building stood out even among the finest structures of Alhazarine. Its sun-baked brick walls were worn by time, yet solid. Delicate reliefs covered the walls, telling ancient myths, shepherds guiding endless flocks beneath benevolent stars. The tiled roof gleamed in the sunlight, as if it still retained divine favor. Before the entrance stood an enormous statue. Half human, half goat. The great shepherd. Its torso was human, with a wise face, short beard, and serene eyes. From the waist down, the body of a powerful sheep, covered in wool carved with unsettling realism. Curse studied it carefully. The statues of Thor Horsehead are more imposing, he thought with a hint of arrogance as he crossed the threshold. The interior of the temple was spacious and silent. An eternal flame burned at the center of the hall. Murals of vivid colors covered the walls, depicting cycles of life, sacrifice, and rebirth. A woman awaited him there. Old. Fat. Wrapped in a light woolen robe with intricate patterns that spoke of status and ritual. My name is Mirai Mazdur, she said in flawless Dothraki. Her voice carried a strange, almost ethereal tone. I am the priestess of this temple. Curse did not answer at once. He studied her closely. He knew her story. In another line of fate, her people had been massacred, her temple profaned, and she raped by 3 men. In that future, Mirai had paid blood with blood, and Khal Drogo had died from a wound that should never have killed him. But this was not that world. Alhazarine had not burned. The temple still stood. She had not been touched. She had no reason to hate him. Why did you ask to see me? Curse asked at last. I have no ill intentions toward you, Mirai replied, looking him directly in the eyes. I wish to guide some priestesses to heal your warriors. To mend their wounds. To ease their pain. Interest flashed in Curse's eyes, but he restrained it. Why help me? All living beings are lambs of the great shepherd, she answered calmly. My faith taught me that I was sent into this world to heal, regardless of where or whom. Curse narrowed his eyes. You have not answered. Mirai's voice trembled slightly. We hope to follow in your steps, and spread the gospel of the Supreme Shepherd to the ends of the world. Curse watched her for a long moment. Then he nodded. I will not interfere in your affairs, he said. And I expect the same respect. I honor all gods, even the Lamb God. The eternal flame crackled. And, for the first time, 2 faiths regarded one another without blood between them. Chapter 23, The Red Priest's Attack. At the same time, on the continent of Westeros, a red priestess stood motionless before the brazier, her gaze fixed on the dancing flames, as if they were whispering secrets no mortal should ever know. Smoke rose in slow spirals, wrapping around her figure until it became blurred, almost unreal, like an apparition born of the fire itself. Her crimson robe swayed gently, alive, as if responding to the pulse of the brazier. She was dressed in red from head to toe, a long silk gown that shimmered with every reflection of the fire, resembling an eternal flame that refused to be extinguished. She was Melisandre, priestess of Arhilar, woman of Asai, bearer of a faith as searing as it was dangerous. Her copper-red hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders, framing a beautiful, sharp, heart-shaped face. Her eyes, of a strange pinkish-red hue, seemed to burn with an inner light. At her throat, the ruby set in her necklace pulsed slowly, like a living heart, feeding on the power that flowed between the world and the beyond. She followed the revelations of the true God, and yet, she had stumbled again and again. The prophecy was clear. When the red star bleeds and darkness gathers, Azor Aha shall be reborn amid smoke and salt. He shall wield Lightbringer. He shall be the prince that was promised. He shall awaken the dragon from stone and lead humanity against the monsters of the long night. For years, Melisandre had believed with absolute certainty that Stannis Baratheon was that hero. Then her heart trembled. A wave of heat ran through her body and she turned her head sharply to the north. Her lips barely moved as she murmured. The fire of Stannis has gone out, and a new light will be reborn in the land of smoke and salt. The flames of the brazier suddenly surged upward, twisting violently. Melisandre slowly fell to her knees, pressing her hands to her chest. The ruby glowed with a deep red, almost blood-like. "A warrior will come," she whispered, her voice trembling with revelation. "He will ride a giant, furry beast with a single horn." But the ruby burned with intensity. Her breathing became uneven as a new vision cut through her like a burning blade. 5 demons from another world will go after the Lightbringer. Her voice broke. They will bring false gods. They will use unnatural abilities to compete with the magic of fire, and they will seek to bring the eternal night. Silence fell over the temple. Melisandre raised her gaze to the flames once more. This time, there was no doubt in her eyes. Only fanaticism, and hope. But the sacred fire will protect the believers. And it will purify all evil. At the same time, in the Westerlands, near Lannisport, not far from the bustling port rose a grey stone castle, crude and menacing, like a scar embedded in the land. Atop its walls flew a great black banner, marked by a terrifying emblem, a ferocious 3-headed dog, bearing its fangs. The banner of House Clegane. Gregor Clegane watched the fields from a nearby hill. Below, several farmers harvested wheat under the watchful eye of armed soldiers. The giant smiled, a twisted grin that rarely foretold anything good. A soldier approached and spoke cautiously. "My lord, the cannons are ready." Gregor's smile widened. "Good. I can't wait to try." A scream interrupted him. A shadow lunged toward him. Gregor turned just in time to see a man wrapped in red robes, his eyes crazed with fury, a dagger wreathed in flames. Without hesitation, Gregor knocked him aside with a single kick. The attacker's body was hurled away and smashed against a rock with a dull sound. But the man in red got back up. Howling with rage, he raised the burning dagger and charged again. "Now you die, demon!" A thunderous sound shook the air. Bang! A column of smoke burst from the weapon of one of Gregor's men. The priest dropped the dagger and clutched his stomach, gasping, eyes bulging. "Cursed demon!" He managed to spit. Bang! This time it was Gregor who fired. The body fell heavily to the ground. Even so, the priest continued staring at Gregor with absolute hatred, spitting blood as he screamed. "You think you can defeat me with tricks and false gods? The punishment of our healer will fall upon you. All enemies of the light will be consumed." Gregor did not respond. He simply stepped forward, bent down, took the man's face in one hand, and crushed it as if it were a ripe fruit. No one understood why the priest had called him demon, nor why he had tried to assassinate him. Some whispered that it was punishment for Gregor's sins. But everyone agreed on one thing. Blood would soon flow. And it would not be little. Unsatisfied even after that, Gregor drew his massive sword and hacked the red priest's corpse apart until nothing recognizable remained. The chaos had already begun. Chapter 24, The Red Comet. Curse was sitting on the ground, near the campfire. The flames crackled softly, casting restless shadows over his figure as he listened to Mulgro's report. "My lord, I regret to disappoint you, but we were unable to discover who took Drogo's corpse." Curse did not respond immediately. His gaze remained fixed on the night sky, where the stars stretched like an infinite mantle, ancient and indifferent. In truth, he did not care much about who had stolen Drogo's body. He had learned of the disappearance the very day it happened, and had barely given it a thought. The question he had asked was not born of concern, but of simple curiosity, a faint discomfort, like a splinter buried beneath the skin. Yet deep within his mind, a persistent intuition refused to be ignored. The disappearance of the corpse. The absence of the 3 dragon eggs. Wedding gifts that never reached Daenerys's hands. Everything was connected. Curse knew he should feel alert, perhaps even alarmed. But instead, a different emotion grew in his chest, pure anticipation, almost childlike. Interesting. I hope you don't disappoint me. The thought crossed his mind as a spark of excitement gleamed in his eyes. He remained that way for several more minutes, contemplating the firmament. Finally, as if he had reached a long-awaited decision, he turned toward Mulgrew and spoke in a low voice, firm and unappealable. Call Daenerys and Rhaenys. Tell them to bring the dragon eggs with them. Mulgrew blinked, confused. Even so, he bowed his head and obeyed without question. Aegon Blackfire. His voice echoed through the tent with a dangerous calm. Jon Connington, bring out the body and the dragon eggs. Jon obeyed without delay. Minutes later he returned carrying a heavy chest, followed closely by several men transporting a wooden coffin. Aegon watched the scene with eyes lit by contained urgency. His fingers tightened firmly around the hilt of his vibranium sword. A simple sword is not enough to face the other time travelers. His thoughts raced. I need dragons. And I need them soon. The problem is that dragons grow slowly, and time is the one thing we do not have. His eyes settled on the coffin. He remembered the report he had received about Drogo's death and could not suppress a grimace of surprise. That man is stronger than I thought. He killed Drogo far too easily. Aegon opened the chest carefully. Inside rested 3 enormous dragon eggs. One was dark green, speckled with bronze blotches. Another was creamy white, threaded with delicate golden veins. The last was black as midnight, streaked with deep red swirls, like lava beneath the surface. When Aegon touched them, he felt the heat. A slow smile spread across his face. I suppose it's time to hatch. Jon stared at the eggs with wide eyes and asked, incredulous. Can we make them hatch? Aegon turned his gaze toward Drogo's body and replied with absolute confidence. Of course. He took the black egg first and walked toward the fire, placing it carefully among the burning embers. The surface of the egg seemed to absorb the heat, its scales gleamed, and small tongues of fire licked the dark stone. Jon placed the other 2 eggs beside it and then retreated hastily, trembling, breathless. The fire gradually diminished into glowing embers. The air shimmered with heat, and wandering sparks rose like dying fireflies. Then Aegon gave the order. Throw in the body. The coffin was shoved into the enormous brazier prepared in advance. Aegon did not fully understand the secrets of dragon hatching, but he had seen enough to reproduce the ritual. He regretted not having found a mage or witch. It was said that sacrificing beings with magical affinity strengthened dragons at birth. At that moment, Jon Connington lifted his gaze. A red comet slowly crossed the eastern sky. In a dark and silent tent, 2 dragon eggs rested on the ground, emanating a solemn and ancient atmosphere, like relics of a forgotten age. Daenerys lifted one carefully. The weight surprised her. The golden shell was hard, but warm. She then touched Rhaenys's red egg. It too was hot. She frowned and asked. Why are the dragon eggs hot today? Curse smiled, a smile laden with meaning. Because the time has come. Rhaenys stared at him intently. In her eyes shone a trembling hope. Can we really make them hatch? She had tried before. She had offered her blood. But it had not worked. She had always felt that something was missing. Curse had tried as well, and unlike her, he had felt rejection. As if the eggs did not accept him. Even so, he observed them calmly and answered the expectant looks of both women. Of course. The time has come. Outside the tent, the red comet burned silently in the night sky. The world was changing. Chapter 25, The Birth of the Dragons. Daenerys and Rhaenys each drew a small dagger. The metal gleamed faintly in the firelight as they made a shallow cut on their fingers. A drop of blood fell from each hand. Both let their blood touch the dragon eggs. The two eggs, barely 30 centimeters long, began to react immediately. Click! The first to crack was the red-colored egg. A small red golden claw emerged from between the cracks, breaking the shell with surprising strength. Kirst's heart leapt. Smaug. It was not the two-legged version from Cinematic Legends, but the original Smaug, with 4 legs. With an extra pair of sharp claws, its combat potential was clearly superior to that of a wyvern. Unlike the dragons native to Westeros, which could only use their hind legs while flying, this creature was designed to kill both on land and in the air. The shell shattered completely. A small 4-legged dragon, with red golden scales, appeared before Rhaenys. Its golden pupils shone with curiosity as it observed the 3 figures surrounding it. Daenerys could not hide her amazement. She had never heard of a dragon with 4 legs. Kirst narrowed his eyes, clearly satisfied, and smiled. From now on, your name will be Smaug. Rhaenys made a small pout. She did not like that her husband had named her dragon without consulting her, but she accepted the name without protest. Click! The second egg began to crack. It was Daenerys's egg. Kirst froze. His eyes widened, and he sprang to his feet. King Ghidorah! Not only him. Daenerys and Rhaenys were completely stunned by the creature emerging from the egg. A golden dragon, with 3 heads and 2 tails. A 3-headed dragon. Just like the Targaryen sigil. Rhaenys exclaimed, being the first to react. Amazing! Daenerys murmured, unable to look away. It took Kirst a few seconds to regain his composure, but when he did, he spoke firmly. King Ghidorah. That will be his name. A 3-headed dragon. Rhaenys repeated, still incredulous. Then something unexpected happened. I'm hungry. The voice echoed through the tent, clear and strange. Daenerys and Rhaenys flinched, terrified. Kirst took only a second to react. Both turned their heads towards Smaug, who clumsily flapped his wings while shouting insistently. Hungry! Hungry! The following morning, as the glow of the rising sun filtered through the seams of the tent, Ser Jorah took out his parchment and quill. Using the agreed-upon code, he began to write a report for Varys. The death of Viserys. When he finished, he crossed several tents with careful steps until he reached the tent of an orphan. There, he placed the letter beneath a stone, in a discreet spot that only someone informed would know to search. He looked around, making sure he was not being watched, and let out a long sigh. Back in his tent, his thoughts turned bitter. He had contributed, indirectly, to Viserys' death. Would the Iron Throne forgive him? Jorah shook his head and smiled bitterly. I fear Eddard Stark still wants to kill me. He sighed. Sometimes he wondered whether it had been worth trading in slaves just to satisfy Lyness's whims. But he knew it well, if he could go back, he would do it again. If I returned to Bear Island, would they accept me? And then another thought arose. What would he do there? He was no longer just an exiled knight. He was Daenerys's guardian. Just as he was beginning to lose himself in his thoughts, he heard Kirst's voice. As soon as he stepped out of the tent, Kirst sought out Mulgrew. Gather all the Khalasars. The order was transmitted quickly. The Dothraki began running toward Kirst's tent, aware that something extraordinary was happening. Even Ser Jorah felt his curiosity awaken. When everyone had gathered, the Dothraki knelt in unison, their foreheads pressed to the ground, showing their utmost reverence. At the center stood Kirst and his wives, Daenerys and Rhaenys. Ser Jorah pushed his way through the crowd. The scene he saw left him paralyzed. 2 creatures were moving near the fire. One had 3 heads and 2 tails. The other had 4 legs and a surprisingly intelligent gaze. They were dragons. Newborn dragons. When the silence was absolute, Curse spoke. Today you witness a miracle. Thanks to the gift of the god Thor Horsehead, we have witnessed the rebirth of creatures the world believed extinct. He paused, letting his words settle. But this is only the beginning. Soon you will witness more miracles. His voice grew heavier. Our next objective will be the Golden City of Karth. At the end of the desert, on the shores of the Black and Salty Sea. The center of the world, where the gates of North and South meet, and the bridges of East and West. Conquering Karth had not been part of his original plan. But the House of the Undying offered something more valuable than gold, knowledge. Curse understood it now. The changes in the world were not simple butterfly effects caused by his presence. He was not the only traveler. First he would pass through V's Tolero. Then, Karth. The magical tide was rising. Supernatural beings were returning. The White Walkers were not a myth. And besides, the wealth of Karth would solve another problem. With its gold. Did he really need to worry about not being able to buy enough ships? Chapter 26, Terence Celtigar. Plus POV, Terence Celtigar. Terence Celtigar stood on the deck of the ship, the salty wind lashing against his face. His eyes shone with excitement as he contemplated the magical horn he held tightly in his hand. From the day he had found it in his family's treasury, that artifact had become his greatest treasure. With it, he had learned to summon a kraken to crush his enemies and sow terror across the seas. The only drawback was the price. Keeping the creature summoned drained his mental energy constantly, as if the ocean itself demanded a tribute for every second of its existence. But that had changed. Since the appearance of the red comet in the skies of West Eros, the horn had begun to vibrate on its own, establishing a strange and profound resonance. He no longer needed to feed the summoning with his mind. The kraken remained there, obedient and eternal, as if the world itself were sustaining it. Terence smiled. His gaze then shifted to the enormous Valyrian steel axe resting near the mast. Crab pincer. The ancestral weapon of House Celtigar. One of the few relics his lineage had managed to preserve from the days of ancient Valyria. When he found it, it had been forgotten for years in the family vault, gathering dust and silence. An unforgivable waste. The problem had always been its weight. No one had been able to wield it, no one except him. His golden finger, the product of the super soldier serum, made the weight of Valyrian steel little more than a minor inconvenience. When the ship finally docked, Terence was the first to disembark. Behind him, 100 guards descended quickly and formed a disciplined line. Very close by, another 20 men advanced with effort, carrying a huge sealed crate. It didn't take long for him to encounter a group moving toward the pier, led by a woman with a fierce bearing and an untamed gaze. Upon seeing him, Yara Greyjoy's eyes widened in surprise. "Terence! My dear wife! I didn't expect you to still remember me. I feel truly flattered." Yara's expression was hard to describe, a mixture of disbelief and annoyance. "Why are you here?" Terence smiled calmly. "Do I need a reason to accompany my dear fiancé? "'Tisk unless you're a beautiful woman, stay away from me," she replied disdainfully. "Wow, we have so much in common. I also love beautiful women. It seems we're the perfect couple." Before Yara could react, Terence stepped closer, wrapped his arms around her, and kissed her. The embrace lasted longer than she would have admitted out loud. When they separated, Yara snorted. "Enough jokes. Tell me what you're here for. I thought you were too busy promoting your religion to have time to visit me." "Hey, don't say that. You know how much I love you. I'll always have time for you." "Oh, yeah? I still remember the first day you arrived at the Iron Islands to propose marriage to me. The first thing you did was say that our beliefs were wrong, that we worshipped the drowned god incorrectly and that his true name was Shumagarath. Then you brought a bunch of grotesque statues and handed them out all over the island saying they were gifts. How could I forget? Terence thought, holding back a proud smile. The first step to winning over your people was using your god and presenting myself as his champion. It helped quite a bit that I could summon the Kraken, the very symbol of House Greyjoy. To use the religion of the drowned god I had to change many things in my favor. Even his name, and his form. I was tempted to use the name and appearance of Thulhu, but it wasn't a good idea to risk actually summoning him. If my time travel was possible, then that being could also reach this world. Shumagarath was safer. An octopus, a god of the abyss, and he also came from the same world as my golden finger. Now that you mention the statues, he said out loud, pointing at the enormous crate carried by his men, I remembered that I brought a special gift. Yara frowned, clearly on the verge of losing her patience. But this one is different, he added quickly. It's made of gold. Ah! Yara sighed, exhausted. Do you remember what I told you the last time we saw each other? Terence asked, quickly changing the subject. Of course I remember. Something about the god Shumagarath speaking to you in dreams, that the true dragon had returned to the world, that the Iron Throne no longer belonged to Robert, and that the reign of the Baratheons was doomed. Yara remembered the confident smile Terence had worn as he spoke that prophecy. And you see, I was right. My words are coming true. His confidence was not feigned. Terence knew the future, he was a time traveler, and the plot was on his side. I'm here because our moment, the one we've been waiting for so long, has finally arrived. Yara saw naked ambition burning in his eyes. Come with me, she finally said. I'll take you to see my father. Terence smiled sideways. But first, we could celebrate with a beautiful girl. Chapter 27, Jon Snow. POV, Aegon Targaryen. Years had passed since I reincarnated into the world of Game of Thrones, and yet, none of it resembled the fantasies I had imagined. Living the life of a bastard was never ideal. When I arrived in this world, I celebrated. I truly did. Knowing that I possessed a golden finger filled me with an almost childish confidence. A new beginning, a glorious destiny, 2 dragon eggs secured, an extraordinary pet, and a life as an orphan prince destined to reclaim the Iron Throne. A perfect script. Then came the worst news a reincarnator could receive. My golden finger was stolen. As someone who had been reborn while retaining memories of another life, I was supposed to be more mature, more resilient. I thought I could endure the harassment, the insults, and the small cruel tricks of that bitch Lady Stark. And I did. I endured in silence as I grew up, bearing looks of contempt and venomous words, preparing myself for the day I would leave to reclaim what belonged to me. But nothing went as planned. When I finally grew old enough and traveled to the place where my dragon eggs were supposed to be hidden, I discovered that they were gone. As if they had never existed. On top of that came the accumulated mental torture after years of living with a family that never truly accepted me. I couldn't understand how it was possible. That area was protected by Robb. No one, except me, should have had access. Who was the bastard who dared to steal them? My dragon eggs even had a requirement, they could only hatch in the hands of someone with Targaryen blood. Not just anyone could use them. While I considered the possibility of creating my own religion to gather fanatics and use them as pawns on my path to the throne, a chill ran through my entire body. It was a primitive, instinctive sensation, as if something or someone was warning me not to do it. I didn't understand why. No matter how much I analyzed it, I couldn't guess that divine being was warning me. When I watched the series, the old gods were barely mentioned. The faith of the Seven had its weight. The Lord of Light, perhaps. But the old gods? They were never fully explored. I even came to believe that the Lord of Light was the one protecting me. But this world was not the story I remembered. It had layers. Hidden depths. Truths buried beneath centuries of faith, blood, and lies. I shook my head and stopped thinking about it. I knew very well how the story of the wall ended. I knew what awaited those who were sent there. That was why I never showed enthusiasm when my uncle hinted that such would be my destiny. I was not going to make that mistake. When everything seemed lost, when I didn't know what my next step should be, I received an unexpected gift. Perhaps the gods had not abandoned me after all. While searching the library for texts on blood magic and ancient rituals, I found an old, forgotten book. Its pages spoke of fire magic, how to manipulate it for religious rituals, how to use it to heal, to resurrect, and to destroy enemies. I began studying under the tutelage of Maester Lewin. At first he laughed at my interest, but upon seeing my genuine enthusiasm, he agreed to teach me what little he knew. I prepared myself for failure. After all, magic had been disappearing for centuries. Or so they believed. To my surprise, I was able to use it. And in the process, I discovered fundamental truths. First, magic had not disappeared completely. Second, it did not work like in anime or novels, where mana was stored in an internal core. Third, and most important, in this world, magic depended on the quality of the sacrifice. After 2 years of preparation, the world changed. The king died. And the red comet appeared in the sky, bringing with it the return of magic. Thanks to that, for the first time I was able to cast powerful spells without relying so heavily on sacrifices. Fire responded to my will as if it recognized me. When I was preparing to depart for King's Landing, my destiny finally in motion, I encountered a group of men wrapped in red robes. And their presence froze my blood. Si choirs, en el siguiente paso pudo. Chapter 28, Manipulation. Point of view, Aegon Targaryen. The silence between us grew heavier. The red priests did not take their eyes off me, as if the fire burning in the torches were only a pale reflection of something far greater watching through them. The eggs did not disappear by chance, said the priest who finally seemed to lead them. They were stolen. I know, I replied coldly. Tell me who. The man slowly shook his head. It was not the one who possesses them now. I frowned. Then speak clearly. The priest stepped closer to the fire. The flames rose, stretching upward as if listening to his voice. The theft was indirect, he explained. The initial act was committed by another traveler. My pulse quickened. His name is Aegon Targaryen, son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Elia Martell. The world seemed to stop for an instant. A chill ran through my body. Then how did they end up in Curse's hands? The priest spoke the name with caution, as if it were a dangerous spark. Curse. Another traveler, he added. More ambitious. More reckless. The pieces fell into place with bitter clarity. Aegon Targaryen had pushed the first piece. Curse had claimed the reward. And Terence Celtigar? I asked. A slow, dark smile crossed the priest's face. He is the third flame. Terence did not touch your eggs, he said. But he awakened something worse. Ancient gods. Abyssal powers. Creatures that do not react to fire. My fingers tightened. Then why speak to me of him? The priest knelt. Because the Lord of Light desires balance. The others followed suit. Travelers are an anomaly, he continued. Only one can be corrected. Several must destroy each other. I slowly raised my gaze. You want me to kill him? No, the priest replied with unsettling sincerity. We want you to kill each other. The fire roared. Curse against Black Fire. Black Fire against Terence. Targaryen against Black Fire. My breathing slowed. The fire does not need to intervene directly, said the priest. One only needs to fan the proper flame. Then I understood the true nature of our healer. He was not a god who granted miracles out of devotion. He was a god who orchestrated wars. Terence Celtigar is key, he continued. His twisted faith, his kraken, his false god, will draw the attention of the other travelers. If we mark him as an enemy of fire, he added, the others will come. I clenched my teeth. And what do I gain? The priest lifted his gaze, and for an instant, I swear I saw something beyond his eyes. You will reclaim what is yours. Dragons. Destiny. And the right to decide who deserves to continue existing in this world. The red comet burned even in broad daylight. Not as a sign of hope, but as a warning. Aegon Blackfire had initiated the chaos. Curse was exploiting it. Terrence was corrupting it. And Arhiller had chosen me to set the board on fire. Chapter 29, The Arrival at V's Tolero. After months of travel, the white and pure city-state finally appeared before Curse and his group. Under the moonlight, it rose before them like a mirage born of the desert, silent, intact, beautiful in an unsettling way. During those months, many things had changed. The two dragons had grown at an alarming speed. They were no longer the fragile creatures that could fit in Daenerys's arms. Their wings, still clumsy, spread farther each day, and when fully extended, they could cover the entire back of a horse. They had begun trying to fly. Each attempt ended the same way, an awkward leap, a furious flapping of wings, and then the brutal impact against the ground. But they never gave up. They tried again and again, roaring in frustration, as if the sky owed them something. The second thing was the death of Doria. One day she fell ill. The fever consumed her rapidly, just as it had in the books. At first the symptoms were minor, blood blisters on her lips, then on her hands. After that, her hair began to fall out in clumps. In only 3 days, Doria died, her body covered in pus, unrecognizable. The one who suffered her death the most was Daenerys. That young woman from Lys had been more than a servant, she had been her guide, her teacher in the secrets of intimacy, the woman who had taught her how to please Curse in the past. But the one most surprised by her death was Curse himself. After all, in his memory, Doria had not died like this. In the original story, Daenerys had locked her away together with Zarozo and Daxos in a Valyrian stone vault, where she died of suffocation. Instead, here, it had been illness that claimed her, exactly as in the books. I tested Daenerys's ability after she managed to hatch the dragon eggs, and indeed, she possesses the unburnt ability, just like in the series, Curse thought. The test had been simple and brutal, direct fire. First, her hair. In the series, even her hair was immune to the flames. In the books, on the other hand, Daenerys had been left bald, the miracle had happened only once. Curse could not help but wonder. Is this world a combination of the series and the books? When the Khalasar approached V's Tolero, a murmur of happiness ran through the crowd. However, that joy died almost immediately when they saw the truth. The city was deserted. There was no smoke, no voices, no movement of any kind. Only white ruins bathed in moonlight. Mulgrew approached Curse with a furrowed brow, uneasy. Cole, this city is deserted and has no owner. That means it is not blessed by the god Thor Horsehead. It would be best to leave immediately. Curse cursed silently upon hearing that, but he could not allow fear to spread. Under the gaze of the entire Khalasar, he pointed to the sand in front of them. There are horse hoof prints leading into the city. That means there are still people here. The effect was immediate. The Dothraki began to murmur excitedly. Ignoring Mulgrew's apologetic look, Curse raised both arms and shouted. Let's go! The Khalasar surged toward the ruined entrance of the city, until Curse raised a hand. Stop! His voice cut through the air like a whip. Everyone stopped, confused. Then it happened. A face appeared out of nowhere before them. Skin pale as ash, lips an unnatural dark blue, and a twisted smile that seemed not to belong to a living being. Magur felt his skin crawl. He stepped back, pointing at the man as he screamed in panic. Ghost! Fear spread like a disease. The city had already been unsettling, but that apparition made it outright terrifying. Magar fell to the ground, seized by terror, though he managed to calm himself when he saw the firm, confident gaze of his father. Mulgrew gripped his arak with both hands, nearly dropping it from his nerves, and shouted without taking his eyes off the stranger. "Warriors, prepare for battle!" The soldiers obeyed instantly, surrounding the unknown man. And in that tense silence, Curse knew one thing with absolute certainty. V's Tolero was not empty. And whatever inhabited it did not belong to this world. Chapter 30, The Magician Piet Pri. Yoram Mormont, who had remained close, protecting Daenerys and the young Rhaenys, stepped forward until he stood beside Curse. His voice was firm, though heavy with caution. "Call Curse, that man is not a ghost. He is an illusionist mage." Curse frowned slightly. The term sounded strangely familiar to him, like an echo of something read long ago, yet he could not recall it clearly. Yora, noticing the doubt reflected on his face, continued explaining, though his own tone wavered slightly. "An illusionist mage is a dark priest who has learned the art of changing shape. They pray to malevolent gods, drink the poisonous water of the night shadows until their cheeks turn pale and their lips become blue. They use their terrifying appearance to display their power." When he finished, even Yora seemed to doubt his own words, as if he had just recounted an old sailor's superstition. But Curse did not take it as fantasy. He knew that this world was still steeped in sorcery. Priestesses like Melisandre claimed to be the voice of the god Arhillar, and miracles or abominations occurred far too often to be ignored. Besides, that face, it was unlike anything he had ever seen. Curse was certain of one thing: in neither of his two lives had he ever looked upon a man so unnaturally ugly. For the first time since arriving in this world, Curse felt real danger. His body tensed, ready to lunge and crush the mage before he could react. Then, a new sound broke the tension. Hooves. Growing clearer, approaching from ahead. Curse and his men turned their gaze toward the source of the noise. Moments later, two tall camels emerged from the gloom, carrying two human figures. Curse did not bother to analyze who they were. In his mind, they were already marked as allies of the mage. He made a subtle gesture, preparing to strike the newcomers first while his warriors kept the illusionists surrounded. Sensing the hostility, the bald, obese man, covered in jewels and luxurious garments, visibly paled. He raised his hands clumsily and shouted urgently in the Valyrian dialect. "Dothraki, please, stop. I am Zarozoan Daxos, one of the 13 great lords of Karth." Curse understood enough Valyrian thanks to his wife's teachings. The moment he processed the name, a wave of contempt surged through his chest. The refined liar from the story. The man who had tried to win over the mother of dragons with empty promises. For an instant, Curse felt the urge to kill him on the spot. Even so, he restrained himself. He raised a hand and ordered his men to stand down. He studied the three figures carefully and thought coldly. If he truly is Zarozoan Daxos, then the supposed illusionist mage can only be one, a sorcerer of the House of the Undying. As if he had heard that thought, the man with white skin and blue lips stepped forward. He spoke in Dothraki, though his pronunciation was clumsy and unnatural. "I am the truth of the Undying House. The great mage Piet Pri. I came only to greet you, but I did not expect my appearance to cause a misunderstanding with friends who have come from so far away, accompanied by dragons." Curse knew that name. In the series, Piet Pri was capable of changing shape, deceiving the senses, and appearing where no one expected him. The fact that he had been able to approach undetected, combined with the sense of danger Curse had felt moments earlier, raised his alertness even further. Noticing that Curse did not lower his guard, Piet Pri slowly stepped back and positioned himself beside Zaro. It was then that the third figure spoke for the first time. The masked woman, who had remained silent the entire time, spoke calmly in the common tongue. "I am Kaith, priestess of Asai. We have followed the bleeding star in search of the dragons. Curse observed her carefully. Unlike Zaro and Piet Pri, whom he knew well, Kaith was an absolute mystery. He did not remember her true name, nor her face, nor the limits of her power. Throughout the entire history, she had been a shadow. And shadows, in this world, were often more dangerous than visible monsters. Chapter 31, The Shadow Attacks. Under the cautious, cold gazes of the Dothraki, Zaro and his group chose to ignore them. Instead, they focused all their attention on the two dragons that remained beside Rhaenys and Daenerys. It was obvious what their objective was. The dragons. The three visitors exchanged brief glances. Without needing words, they reached a silent decision: the merchant would take the first step, softening the atmosphere with sweet words and golden promises. Zarozo and Daxos had never felt any respect for the Dothraki. In his eyes, they were nothing more than uncivilized savages, naive barbarians of low birth, not worth negotiating with as equals. But dragons, that was another matter. Zaro had studied everything Karth knew about them. Rebellious, proud creatures, bound only to those they recognized as their own. He observed carefully, the dragons tolerated the presence only of Rhaenys, Daenerys, and the large warrior who had stepped forward to protect them. That told him who truly mattered. Before moving ahead, he narrowed his eyes and observed Curse for less than a minute, and then dismissed him entirely. Zaro knew that among the Dothraki it was almost a natural law: the longer the braid, the greater the prestige. Khals wore their hair long, a symbol of victories and power. Curse, with his hair cut short, barely brushing his shoulders and without a braid worth mentioning, seemed to him a lesser warrior. A failed Dothraki who had lost his braid, or worse, had cut it off out of cowardice. A nobody. Zaro urged his camel forward. He passed beside Curse without even looking at him and directed his practiced smile toward the two young women. Especially toward the silver-haired one, whose beauty seemed unreal, almost divine. He did not know, nor could he imagine, that this simple gesture had ignited the wrath of Curse. Curse's body tensed. He leaned slightly forward, like a beast about to pounce. At that instant, the lips of the priestess of Asai barely moved, without making a sound. From her shadow, something answered. The darkness twisted upon itself like a living serpent. From it emerged a black, formless figure that took shape with unnatural speed. A short sword condensed in its hand before the shadow sank back into the ground. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. No one noticed. No one, except Piet Pri. The illusionist mage observed the scene closely, struggling to suppress a smile. A look of false concern crossed his face, as though he truly cared about the life of the Dothraki who was about to die. Zaro, unaware of everything, continued forward. When he was about 3 meters from Daenerys and Rhaenys, surrounded by Dothraki warriors, he pulled on the reins and stopped his mount. He placed his right hand over his chest in an exaggerated gesture of courtesy. "Beautiful ladies, you must be the Khaleesi of this group of Dothraki, correct?" Mulgrew, still tense and angered by everything that had happened, answered in their place with a harsh voice. "These are our Khaleesi. What is it that you want?" Zaro ignored him completely. Without wiping the smile from his face, he addressed only the young women once more. "Dear Khaleesi, welcome to my vacation estate. You must both be tired, thirsty, and hungry. Please, accompany me to the palace I have prepared for you. The well water is warm and clean, perfect for washing away the dust of the road and restoring your beauty. We will prepare the finest specialties of Karth for your enjoyment. And of course, your dragons will also be treated with the greatest care." In truth, Zaro was only half lying. They had arrived recently as well, and their provisions were nearly exhausted. But before Daenerys or Rhaenys could respond, Curse attacked. He lunged like lightning toward the bald man who had ignored him, determined to snap his neck with his bare hands. Just as his fingers were about to close, a black figure burst from the ground. The shadow leapt with terrifying speed, its short sword aimed directly at Kur's heart. The ambush was perfect. There was no time to dodge. No time to defend. Ah! When death was an instant away from reaching him, a burst of energy erupted from Daenerys's feet. A crimson bolt tore through the air, accompanied by a sharp, unnatural screech. The shadow was pierced through. Kur's, surviving by the narrowest margin his first true life-or-death crisis in this world, did not relax. He sprang backward, retreating more than 3 meters. He watched closely as the dark figure writhed on the ground, emitting sounds of agony, dissolving like smoke under the sun. Then, Kur slightly turned his head. His gaze met that of the small 3-headed dragon. He gave it a silent look, filled with gratitude. Chapter 32, Smaug is angry. Everything happened too fast. Daenerys, Rhaenys, and the Khalasars barely had time to react. Curse, my son, and stars, are you all right? Daenerys and Rhaenys asked in unison, their voices tense. Cole. Although everyone knew that Curse was powerful better than anyone, the fear spread like wildfire. More than 200 voices shouted at once, eclipsing even the agonized screeches of the shadow creature writhing on the ground, clutching its head as it was slowly consumed by the scarlet rays of King Ghidorah. Zaro had also escaped death by a ridiculous margin. It took him a few seconds to understand what had happened, and when he did, terror struck him head-on. The man without braids whom he had despised. He was not a nobody. He was Curse, the absolute king of the Grass Sea. The chosen of the horse-head god Thor. Zaro had heard rumors, exaggerated stories told by trembling merchants. But now, seeing him up close, he understood something that no rumor had ever fully captured. He had never seen a Dothraki so tall, so solid, so terrifyingly real. The realization came late. Too late. His obese body began to tremble uncontrollably, like a pig before sacrifice. He cursed his arrogance. He cursed his carelessness. Then, Curse spoke. He turned toward Smaug, who rested on Rhaenys's shoulder, and asked in a low, dangerous voice. Don't you think so, my son? What do you say we go together to destroy the secret? Before everyone's incredulous eyes, the dragon replied with restrained fury. Yes, father. I will kill them all. A deadly silence fell over the scene. Zaro, Piet-Pri, and Kaith understood it instantly. The wisdom of dragons was not inferior to that of humans. Smaug was the most aware of Rhaenys's dragons. He thought, he spoke, and now he was furious because his father had almost died. When Curse began to advance, the fear on Piet's face became evident. The mage who walked among shadows, who changed shape and drank ancient poisons, was trembling. Not before the dragon. Before the man. How could a mortal inspire such terror? The slight tremor of his body and the grimace of panic on his face betrayed him. Curse observed him closely. That confirmed his suspicion. Piet had not summoned the shadow creature. Even so, he did not lower his guard. He knew that the true dangers were always those that attacked unseen. Piet knew it as well. The camels could not flee. And that man moved like the wind. He clenched his teeth. He pulled out a small bottle of thick, dark blue liquid hidden among his clothes. He uncorked it and drank it in a single gulp. His lips turned even bluer, almost black. But he had no time to do anything else. A gigantic fist slammed into his face. Piet was sent flying, rolling across the sand. Curse could have killed him in the first second. He did not. He had heard stories, mages who sought immortality, blew poisonous leaves from black-barked trees, essences mixed with forbidden substances. Drinks capable of opening the mind to illusions, gods, and ancient sorceries. It reminded him of Euron Greyjoy. Of horns, false gods, enslaved dragons. True or not, he needed to verify it. Because in this world witches still existed, and only by understanding their power could he protect himself from it. Piet did not die. A pale blue mist began to envelop his body. Curse tensed immediately, ready to order Smog to breathe fire. But the mage spoke first. He fixed a deep gaze on Daenerys and Rhaenys, and then on Curse. The gods drove the comet to show the path to the new Dragon Master. They sent me to welcome you. If you can control a dragon, we should not be enemies. I will wait for you at the immortal temple of Karth to open the gate of wisdom. His body blurred and vanished. Curse spat on the ground in disdain. Bah! I didn't even hit him with all my strength. If I wanted to, he'd already be headless, meeting his gods. But since you invited me, I'll go. Then, he turned his attention to the priestess. He had understood the truth, the shadow was part of her. A torn-away reflection. Kaith groaned. Her face began to burn, to itch. She screamed in pain as she tore off her mask. Beneath it was rotten flesh. Maggots. Living decay. Many women of the Khalasar looked away. Some vomited. Even the hardened warriors, who licked blood from blades, felt revulsion. You will pay for this, the priestess screamed. Curse smiled and uttered the words he had loved so much in his past life. Dracarys. Smog did not hesitate. The dragon's flames engulfed the priestess. Kaith stopped screaming. She looked at him with grey eyes, strangely calm. Mortals will die someday. I saw you die at the hands of your own people, he he he. And she was reduced to ashes. Chapter 33, Jon is just another pawn. In the heart of the fire, where the flames remember time. The flames do not only show the future. They also remember what has already happened. In a circular chamber carved beneath Asai, 7 braziers burned, forming an incomplete star. At the center, an obsidian mirror reflected not faces, but overlapping lives, repeating again and again like shattered echoes. A figure appeared in the fire. A bastard child. A young man with tired eyes. A king who never was. Jon Snow. Aegon Targaryen. The traveler. The voice that spoke was not human. He has lived this before. A priestess bowed deeply. We know, Lord of Light. He remembers fragments. He knows too much. That is why he believes he is special. The fire showed scenes that did not belong to this world, chained dragons, a silver-haired queen walking through flames, a throne made of swords melting. He is not the objective. Another priestess, younger, hesitated for a moment. But he fulfills the prophecy, born amidst smoke and salt, died and returned. The fire roared. Prophecies are tools. Not destinies. The obsidian mirror changed. Now it showed Daenerys Targaryen. Naked among ashes. Dragons being born from fire. The red comet reflected in her violet eyes. The flames rose violently. She is the Axis. A trembling voice asked. And the traveler? The flames dimmed briefly, as if the world were holding its breath. He will be used. He will be guided. He will be sacrificed. The truth they will never tell Aegon. The Red Priests always knew. They knew that Jon Snow did not fully belong to this world. They knew his soul was displaced in time. They knew he had seen the end, and failed. That is why they pushed him. They showed him fire when he needed hope. They spoke to him of destiny when he doubted. They called him the prince that was promised when he was broken. Not to crown him, but to prepare the ground. Every decision Aegon made had to open paths. Every war of his had to weaken another traveler. Every sacrifice of his had to feed the fire. Until he was no longer necessary. The version Aegon will never hear. In another flame, in another temple, a priest spoke in a low voice. If he survives, he will be an obstacle. If he dies, the fire will grow. In both cases, we win. The old man nodded. The traveler believes he fights for the Iron Throne. A cruel smile formed in the fire. But in truth, he fights so that she may sit upon it. The true center of the prophecy. The flames returned to Daenerys. The dragons were no longer small. The red comet circled above her head like a crown. The shadows bowed before her. The world does not need a king who remembers the past. It needs a queen who burns it all. A priestess whispered, enraptured. Mother of dragons. Breaker of chains. Living flame. The old man closed the ritual with final words. Jon Snow is the sword. Daenerys Targaryen is the fire. And fire, always consumes the sword. Chapter 34, Western Situation. Xaro was stunned upon hearing the introduction of the two women. A complex expression appeared on his face, a mixture of surprise and belated understanding, before he exclaimed in amazement. So you are the daughter and the granddaughter of the Mad King. No wonder you can control dragons. I should have believed the rumors circulating in Pentos. They said you married the strongest Khal of the great grass sea, the chosen of the horse-headed god Thor, Kolkiris. However, upon noticing the clear displeasure reflected on both women's faces, he realized he had spoken too much. Tragically aware of his mistake, he hastened to correct himself, raising his voice with urgency. Robert Baratheon, ruler of the Seven Kingdoms and protector of the entire realm, is dead. Rhaenys held her breath. Her voice came out in a trembling whisper, laden with disbelief and long-repressed fury. He's dead? Is the usurper truly dead? If there was anyone in that room who hated Robert Baratheon with every fiber of her being, it was Rhaenys. Daenerys also despised him, but her hatred was inherited, fed by Viserys' stories. It could not compare to resentment forged through real losses, through tragedies lived in the flesh. Xaro did not dare to lie. The fear that curse might reduce him to ashes outweighed any temptation to exaggerate or twist the truth. I would not dare tell lies to the descendants of the true dragon. The news is absolutely true. In Qarth, in the Summer Isles, and in every trading port where ships dock, the same story is repeated. The great changes in Westeros seemed confirmed. Curse nodded slightly, while a shadow of reflection crossed his gaze. It seems the changes caused by the time travelers have not diverted the plot too much, or perhaps they themselves strive to preserve it, in order to maintain their advantage. He then turned his eyes toward his wives, with silent concern. Rhaenys pressed her lips together, forcing herself to remain firm. She would not show weakness in front of her husband, her aunt, or her son. Daenerys, on the other hand, could not. Unlike Rhaenys, who had grown up under Curse's protection, she was born amid flight and despair, in the midst of the greatest storm that had ever struck the narrow sea. As long as the usurper breathed, her life had been an endless succession of fears. Now that she knew of his death, a sense of freedom wrapped around her, along with deep confusion. Tears sprang unbidden from her violet eyes, empty and trembling. No one there could understand the constant pressure or the silent hatred she had carried throughout her life. Dany became trapped in that tide of emotions, and both Rhaenys and Maegor moved closer to comfort her. It was then that Curse spoke, in a seemingly casual tone, but laden with intent. How did the king die? Xaro answered without hesitation. It is said that he was stabbed to death by a ferocious boar during a hunt in the Kingswood, outside King's Landing. Although other rumors also circulate, that Queen Cersei was involved, that it was her two younger brothers, some even blame his newly appointed hand, Lord Eddard Stark. Curse let out a sigh of relief and murmured. Thank goodness he died as he was supposed to, though it seems none of my compatriots dared to kill him directly, the way those absurd fanfic protagonists I read about in my past life do. Although he knew he was not the only traveler in that world, such details still mattered to him. They even stimulated him. He did not fear having enemies. What he truly feared, was having no rivals. However, noticing that Daenerys was still affected, he gestured toward the door and called the handmaidens. Irri, Yahiki, the Khaleesi is exhausted. Take her to bathe and rest. Just then, Daenerys took a deep breath and gently shook her head. Don't worry, my love. I feel better. I still have something I want to ask Zaro. She wanted to know what had happened in the Seven Kingdoms after Robert's death. Renice asked the question for her. What changes have occurred in Westeros since Robert's death? Zaro drew a breath before answering. His eldest son, Joffrey, ascended the throne, but real power lies in the hands of the Queen's family, the Lannisters. Robert's two younger brothers have proclaimed themselves kings and are ready to march on King's Landing. Lord Eddard Stark was beheaded for treason. His son, Robb Stark, calls himself the Young Wolf and has been crowned king in the north. He is currently fighting against the army commanded by the Kingslayer, Jaime Lannister. He paused briefly before continuing. I have also heard unsettling rumors, new religions have arisen, the Lannister's dog has begun to bite the hand that feeds him, magical weapons capable of firing thunder are circulating, and there is talk of a queen of salt and rock, as well as a Velaryon blessed by the drowned god, pardon me, by the god Shumagarath, as they now call him, who acts as consort. Curse smiled, a grin laden with dangerous amusement. They have turned on one another and plunged Westeros into absolute chaos. And it seems, those time travelers are also beginning to move their pieces. As long as they don't possess outrageously golden fingers like those broken systems, I am fully confident I can defeat them. Curse thought, smiling with absolute certainty. Chapter 35, Curse's second child is born. After being satisfied with the information obtained, he spoke in a calm but firm voice. First, I will spare your life. You will be useful to me in the future. Second, you will write a letter to your steward or your wife asking them to send all your belongings. Make it clear, I will personally inspect them. Do not try anything strange if you truly value your life. Upon hearing Curse's words, Zaro did not fall into despair. On the contrary, his face lit up with genuine joy as he understood that he had gained a chance to survive. Thank you for this opportunity, Curse. I will comply with all your requests. I will certainly ask that all my belongings be delivered as a gift worthy of your majesty. Curse smiled, satisfied with such immediate obedience, and raised his voice. Mulgrew. Find a comfortable room so that our dear guest may rest until his gifts arrive. Mulgrew bowed his head respectfully. Yes, the blood of my blood. Then Curse turned his gaze toward Maegor, who was fiddling with the dragons with evident boredom. Brat, go train with Yora. Maegor showed a mischievous smile that he immediately hid, replacing it with a pitiful expression. But father, since the last time I trained with him, he didn't want to keep doing it. Curse let out a brief laugh and shook his head. Tell him it is an order from me. From now on he will not be able to refuse any of your training requests. Maegor jumped with joy. Long life father! You're the best! Curse replied with a knowing smile. I expect you to give it your all and not hold back. Not just because Yora is older. Holding back would be a lack of respect toward a formidable warrior like him. Maegor's smile turned dark. Don't worry, father. I won't hold back. Curse paced back and forth along the corridor outside the room. The screams that burst from within cut through him like invisible blades, one after another, tightening his chest. Suddenly, the cry of a baby broke the air. Curse stopped dead in his tracks. Renice lay on a wide Dornish-style bed, bathed in the warm light of the room. The silk sheets were stained with blood. Your Majesty, it's a boy, announced a handmaid as she approached. Although the birth had been normal, Renice's face was still covered in sweat. Her strong, resilient body responded immediately. She sat up, took the wrinkled, crying baby, and bathed him with her own hands. Good boy, don't cry, don't cry. Mommy is here. Maegor, who had remained beside his father the whole time, spoke with contained impatience. Father, have they already given my brother a name? Before Curse could answer, Renice spoke. Her face radiated maternal warmth, though a shadow of sadness lingered between her brows. Rhaegar. Rhaegar Targaryen. As she spoke the name, her gaze drifted toward the sea visible through the window, as if her thoughts crossed the ocean. Don't worry, my love, Kerr stepped closer and spoke softly. I will reclaim everything that belongs to you. He paused briefly and looked at Daenerys, who was holding her swollen belly with both hands, surrounded by her children. Everything that belongs to us. At that moment, two small heads peeked in through the window. Smaug and King Ghidorah looked at the newborn with childlike curiosity. That my son was born in this place abandoned by the gods. I don't know if that's a good or a bad sign, Kerr thought. Daenerys, as an aunt, was radiant. Seeing her niece's and beloved husband's child born healthy filled her heart. She looked at Kerr with shining eyes. I can't wait for our child to be born. I hope that when he grows up he'll be as strong as his father and his brothers. Kerr feigned a displeased expression and replied with light laughter. No one is as strong as I am. Not that brat nor those yet to come. But I think he'll be strong enough to defeat Yora with a single punch. Daenerys rolled her eyes. Why do you like picking on him so much? He's a good man, he's loyal to me, and he's never provoked you. Why do you always bother him? Kerr merely snorted in response. Seeing that he had no intention of answering, Daenerys changed the subject. They say the dragons ridden by Aegon the Conqueror and his sisters measured more than 150 meters, and that the shadow of their wings could cover entire towns. My love, how long do you think it will take before we can ride them? Kerr, still slightly annoyed by her defense of Yora, replied casually. I don't think they'll take long to grow. Especially with the rise in the tide of magic. Daenerys fell silent, understanding his mild irritation. She caressed her belly and smiled tenderly. Be born soon, my child. I can't wait to hold you in my arms. Chapter 36, Rhaegar vs Yora. The sun had barely risen above the horizon when the clash of steel shattered the camp's stillness. Yoram Mormont stepped back 2 paces, digging his heels into the damp sand. Before him stood Rhaegar, gripping a training spear far too large for his age, yet his stance was firm, unnaturally firm for a child. My lord, that's enough for today, Yora said, breathing heavily. Your body is still. No, Rhaegar replied coldly. My father said you were not to hold back. Yora clenched his teeth. Damn it, that child shouldn't be able to move like that. The Knight of the Bear tightened his grip on the training sword and advanced without restraint. His strike came down hard, aimed straight at the shoulder. Rhaegar did not retreat. He twisted the spear, deflecting the blow with a sharp, efficient motion, then stepped in immediately, driving the shaft into Yora's chest. The impact was brutal. The air burst from the grown man's lungs in a choked gasp. Ugh! Yora dropped to his knees. Around them, the soldiers froze. No one spoke. No one breathed. Get up, Rhaegar ordered. Yora looked up. There was no arrogance in the boy's eyes. No emotion. Only calculation. This is no longer training, Yora growled as he forced himself to stand. This is survival, Rhaegar interrupted. If you can't withstand me, you will die in a real war. Yora roared and charged. The sword whistled through the air fast, lethal. Rhaegar released the spear, rolled beneath the swing, and hurled himself forward with his entire body. His small fist slammed directly into Yora's stomach. The sound was dry. Something broke. Yora was sent flying several meters, rolling across the sand until he came to a stop on his back, coughing blood. Absolute silence. One of the Dothraki took a step back, superstitious. That. Another murmured. That is not human strength. Rhaegar walked slowly toward Yora, stood over him, and tilted his head. You didn't hold back, he said, with a hint of disappointment. And yet you're still weak. Yora tried to rise. His arms trembled. This child is a monster. From a distance, Kerr watched with his arms crossed. He did not intervene. He did not shout. He showed no surprise. Good, he thought. He didn't hold back. Magur stepped back and resumed his stance. We continue. Yora let out a bitter laugh as he spat blood. By the seven, no. By the old gods, not even them. He coughed and looked up. You are worthy of respect, boy. Magur did not respond. He attacked. What followed was hell. Blows that would have killed an ordinary man. Bones cracking. Sand stained red. Each time Yora fell, Magur waited. Each time he rose, the child attacked again. There was no unnecessary cruelty. Only absolute demand. At last, Yora fell one final time, unable to move. Magur watched him in silence for several seconds. Today you learned something, he said at last. Yes, Yora replied with a broken smile. That there are things that should not be born. Magur turned on his heel and walked away without looking back. From the shadows, Curse smiled. Chapter 37, Red Priestess. The birth of his second child did not succeed in diverting Curse's thoughts from his true objective. Karth. From the very beginning, his vision had differed from Daenerys's in the original history. While she dreamed of returning home, conquering cities only in passing and freeing slaves as a means to an end, Curse saw something greater. He did not want to conquer in order to leave. He wanted to conquer in order to rule. As a time traveler, from the moment he awakened in this world and made the decision to marry Rhaenys and Daenerys, his fate had been sealed: expansion, dominion, control. This was not a forgiving world. Gods, magic, hidden travelers. Here, weakness had no place. Only through constant conquest can I gain support, and faith in me, he thought. In his past life, when he still called himself Pickle, he had been a primitive man who fought dinosaurs for sheer survival. In this life, the enemy had changed. Now he was destined to fight gods, and others like himself. In another room, far removed from plans of conquest, Rhaenys and Daenerys spoke in low voices. It has always surprised me that you managed to escape the Lannisters and flee to another continent while you were still just a child, Daenerys said as she watched the newborn sleep. Rhaenys smiled faintly. Ha! I've always said it was the work of the god Thor, Horsehead. It was a good story to help my husband gain status among the Dothraki, she admitted. Then her expression grew more thoughtful. But in truth, I've always suspected it was another being, or something else, that saved me. I even came to think it might have been my little brother. Aegon? Daenerys asked, surprised. I don't know. I was terrified. Everything happened too fast. My memories of that night are fragments. Daenerys remained silent for a few seconds before speaking again. I've always respected you for staying here, helping Curse. You could have returned to Dorne. She whispered, stroking the baby's small head. Rhaenys looked at her seriously. My father used to say that the dragon has 3 heads. So, naturally, the 3 of us must remain together. Daenerys hesitated for a moment before saying. Dorne could help us. Troops, instructors, support. Impossible. Rhaenys shook her head without hesitation. Although I hid my identity at first, once I learned that Curse planned to marry you, I stopped doing so. I even revealed it openly. And even then, I've received no response. Not even to verify who I am. She sighed softly. Unless Curse marches on King's Landing and is absolutely certain of victory, the Martells will not make a move. They will change sides, as they always do. Otherwise, there was no hope. Just as Daenerys was about to respond, the sound of footsteps interrupted the conversation. Both women looked up. And tensed. The newcomer was a priestess of the Red God. Although she had entered alone, both knew because of Curse's warnings that the priests of the Red God never came without danger. Dark magic, omens, sacrifices, nothing good. Renis's heart began to pound. Instinctively, she pulled the child closer to her chest. The woman was dressed in red from head to toe. A crimson silk hood concealed her hair and much of her face, revealing only eyes that seemed to burn with a fire of their own. Renis noticed something unsettling. The priestess barely looked at her, or at the baby. Her eyes were fixed on Daenerys. "The chosen one," the woman said in a gentle voice, almost pleasant, yet laden with something that froze the blood. "Must return to the correct path." "Return?" Daenerys asked, confused. "To what correct path?" The priestess smiled beneath the hood. And the fire in her eyes seemed to intensify. Chapter 38, Red Priestess PT2. "My daughter, you are confused," said the Red Priestess with a soft, almost maternal smile, while her eyes burned like embers fixed on Daenerys. "You must stop following that extraterrestrial demon and return to the correct path. You are still in time to fulfill your mission." Extraterrestrial demon? Daenerys thought, bewildered. Is she talking about my husband? Before she could respond, Rhaenys stepped forward. "What correct path is that you speak of?" she asked, her voice firm, trying to extract information from the sorceress, and buy time. The priestess slowly turned her head toward her. "Child," she replied with dangerous calm, "the original enemy of our Hiller has always been the god of cold. The Great Other. But the arrival of those foreigners changed everything. They altered the fate of the world. They brought death, chaos, and false gods." Rhaenys narrowed her eyes. "So your god is a benevolent god?" she asked sarcastically, letting out a mocking laugh. "A savior who will bring peace and prosperity to this world." In truth, every second she spoke was a silent prayer for the guards to arrive. "He is the only true god," the priestess answered without flinching. "Our Lord burns in the eternal struggle against the Great Other, cold and death. And now, against the foreigners." That was enough. Killing intent flooded Rhaenys's chest like a raging fire. Without thinking, she drew the dagger at her waist and aimed it directly at the woman's neck. "Witch!" she shouted furiously. "Though many believe I am a believer, I am no superstitious fool. Damn flame worshipper! When my husband arrives, he will show you true power, and split you in two with his Valyrian steel scimitar." For the first time, the priestess's serene expression cracked. Her lips barely moved. Valyrian steel. Rhaenys noticed it instantly. "She's afraid," she thought with cruel satisfaction. So it was true, sorcerers fear Valyrian steel. Just as Curse had told her. The priestess finally looked away from the dagger and fixed her gaze once more on Daenerys. Her expression softened again, almost compassionate. "Daenerys," she said gently. "I am not your enemy. I am your guide. Come with me." Daenerys took a deep breath. She felt the weight of destiny, of words, of prophecies, and yet her decision was clear. "I'm sorry," she replied firmly, without trembling. "I don't know why you believe my husband is a demon. But whatever happens, I will always stand by his side." The priestess watched her in silence, searching for a crack, a doubt, a hesitation. She found none. For a moment, something like regret crossed her gaze. Then she composed herself and stepped back, accepting defeat, for now. Before leaving, her voice echoed like an ancient whisper. "To go north, you must travel south. To reach the west, you must go east. To move forward, one must step back. And to touch the light, you must first pass beneath the shadow lands." The silence she left behind was more unsettling than her presence. Chapter 39, Curse is angry. Curse did not raise his voice. For those who knew him, that was always the worst sign. The messenger finished speaking with a dry throat, cold sweat sliding down his neck as he recounted every word of the Red Priestess, every glance, every veiled threat. When he finished, the tent was plunged into a heavy, oppressive silence, as if the air itself had grown denser. Curse remained motionless. Then, he smiled. A slow, dangerous smile that did not reach his eyes. An extraterrestrial demon, he murmured, bringing a hand to his chin. How poetic! He clenched his fingers. The wood of the improvised throne's backrest creaked under the pressure of his grip. So our healer has noticed me as well, he continued with apparent calm. It was inevitable. Memories of his past life of Pickle, the primitive hunter who had torn the throats out of dinosaurs with his bare hands, overlapped with those of this world. Gods. Prophecies. Manipulators of fate. Always the same pattern, entities playing at being absolute. And from all of them, he had taken something. She dared to enter where my child sleeps, he said then, a note of steel in his voice. That is no longer religion. It is a declaration of war. Yora, who stood near the entrance, stiffened. Should I gather the men, my king? Curse slowly shook his head. No. If I start cutting down priests now, I confirm their narrative. I become the monster they need to justify their crusade. He stood up. Each step he took was firm, heavy, as if the ground itself recognized his authority. But I will not allow them to touch what is mine. He stopped at the opening of the tent and looked up at the night sky. The stars shone with indifference, or perhaps with anticipation. Our healer does not speak through that woman, he said with disdain. It is the opposite. She believes she hears the voice of her God, when in truth she only hears the echoes of something that is using her. His gaze hardened. Curse smiled again, this time with naked ferocity. I am not here to destroy this world. A brief silence. But demon. He shook his head. No. He lifted his gaze, and for a moment his eyes seemed to reflect something ancient, something vast. He paused. I am here to conquer it. He turned sharply toward Yora. From this moment on, no priest of the Red God is to come within 100 paces of my family. If they insist, you expel them. If they do not understand, you mark them. And if they cross the line again. He did not finish the sentence. There was no need. Yora struck his chest with his fist. It will be done. Curse exhaled slowly, calming himself. And sent discreet messengers. I want to know how many red temples there are in Karth, who finances them, and whom they truly pray to. Before Yora left, Curse added, almost as if thinking aloud. Prophecies are cages for the weak. And I was not born to live in a cage. In the distance, in the darkness, one of the dragons lifted its head and let out a low, uneasy roar, as if something, beyond the stars, had just turned its gaze toward them. Chapter 40, Pickle's Foresight. Although the attack by the Red Priestess brought tension and upheaval, it did not slow Curse's plans. Now that his second son had been born, it was time to continue advancing with his next move. When his blood riders learned of his intentions, they said nothing and did not openly object, yet it did not seem wise to them. One of them could not help but step forward to advise him. Blood of my blood, at present we have only a small number of warriors. The rest are elders, the weak, women, and children, fewer than 400 in total. If we recklessly set out to trample great and wealthy city-states such as Karth, Mirian, and Yunkai, we will only be annihilated or enslaved by others. Standing among them, Curse made no comment. He understood their concerns well, but he already had a plan. He intended to go to Astapor and purchase slaves, though he had no intention of explaining that. The arrival of more anomalies such as time travelers and red priests had forced him to change his original plan of waiting for the birth of his child and Daenerys's. He had decided to move forward at once. He offered no further words and ordered wine to be brought and a celebration to be held, to ease the soldiers' spirits. Meanwhile, Sir Yoram Mormont, taking advantage of the fact that Rhaenys had withdrawn from the feast to sleep beside her newborn, leaving Daenerys alone, could not resist approaching. He listened to the soft sound of the Khaleesi's voice as she voiced her grievances. She spoke of the usurper's death, of Westeros falling into ruin, and of how she did not understand why the Red Priests were seeking her. Daenerys noticed Yora's approach but paid him no mind. The exiled knight sat before her. She remembered Kerst's warning that she should be wary of him, that he might harbor other thoughts about her. And, deep down, she herself had sensed it. Yet she felt no romantic affection for the bald man who was twice her age, old enough to be her grandfather, whose eyes filled with desire whenever he looked at her. She treated him only as another loyal subordinate. Whether Yora knew her true opinion of him or not remained uncertain. In his heart, he thought, as long as Kerst lives, neither Daenerys nor her feelings will ever be free. And that was what troubled him. He believed that Wildman was not worthy of someone like Daenerys nor even of Rhaenys, if she too proved to be a Targaryen. Yora had previously overheard Kerst's plan when he shared it with Daenerys and Rhaenys. It was not that Kerst had bothered to conceal it, he simply did not care if Yora listened. The plan was to go to Slaver's Bay. Seeking to start a conversation, Yora chose a different subject and asked. Khaleesi, have you ever heard the legendary tale of the 3,000 Unsullied who defended Qohor, one of the 9 great free cities? Daenerys looked mildly surprised and replied. No, I have not. Yora's expression grew reverent. More than 400 years ago, a powerful Khal named Tima, commanding nearly 30,000 Dothraki warriors with bells braided into their hair, rode forth from the east into Slaver's Bay, pillaging and slaughtering every village in his path. He approached the magnificent city of Qohor, then counted among the 3 greatest free cities with overwhelming force. Khal Tima defeated the Bright Banners and the Second Sons, 2 great mercenary companies that defended the city. Facing invasion, the Qohoric burned their ships and hastily purchased 3,000 Unsullied, whom they had once despised. The mounted warriors did not take the eunuch army seriously either. When more than 20,000 riders charged, the Unsullied merely raised their shields, lowered their spears, and stood unmoving like mountains. The Dothraki charged nearly 20 times, yet against the wall of shields and the razor-sharp spears of the Unsullied, spears that seemed an extension of their own bodies, they broke like waves against stone. Under a rain of arrows, the Unsullied simply lifted their shields above their heads, fearless of death. By the battle's end, little more than 600 of the original 3,000 remained alive, yet more than 10,000 mounted warriors lay dead upon the field, including Khal Tima and all the leaders of his Khalasar. The Dothraki respects strength. The new Khal ordered the surviving warriors to cut off their braids and cast them before those brave fighters. From that day on, the loyal Unsullied became renowned and the first choice of the powerful when purchasing slaves. Daenerys, who had never paid attention to such tales before, could not help but ask. Is that truly so? Yora nodded. It is, Khaleesi. Anyone who studies the history of the free cities knows this. Those words stirred even greater admiration in Daenerys for her husband. It seems my husband is a man of foresight. If we possessed an Unsullied army such as you describe, those cursed rebels would surely tremble. Precisely. Khal Curse is fit to be a conqueror. Well, I am glad to hear that you too admire my husband. I will retire now to rest. She gently stroked her swollen belly as she spoke. Yora watched her depart. He was on the verge of speaking, but the words caught in his throat, and all he could do was stand there and watch her walk away. New chapter is coming soon. Write a review.